My name is Emily. I'm 30 years old and I work at a company. This year, I got married to my husband Jake. The only unusual thing about our marriage was that Jake already had 2 children from his first wife, who passed away last year. His older son, Ethan, is 10 and his younger son, Noah, is 8. After marrying Jake, I suddenly became a mother to them. Noah accepted me right away and treated me like his mom. But Ethan was different. He kept his distance, spoke to me awkwardly, and didn't seem comfortable around me. I understood that he was still grieving his mom, so I didn't rush him. I just hoped that little by little he would open up to me. 2 years later, I found out I was pregnant. Soon, I gave birth to a healthy baby girl, Lily. Ethan and I were still not very close, but he was incredibly protective of Lily. He loved her like a real little sister. Overall, our family was doing well, but there was one big problem. Jake's parents were always mean to me. His father, Robert, and his mother, Linda, never missed a chance to put me down. Instead of being happy when I was pregnant, they criticized me. They said that because Lily was so much younger than Ethan and Noah, people would gossip about them being half-siblings. I couldn't believe it. Were they really so worried about what others thought that they ignored their own grandchild? Since Jake and I both worked, we often left the kids at Robert and Linda's house, and we usually had dinner there after work. Every time we ate together, Linda would throw insults at me. "You're a woman, but you don't do anything around the house. You just work, have a kid, and that's it. What a shameful wife you are," she would say. She only said things like this when the kids weren't around. Robert also took any chance he could to blame me for things. Over the years, they had yelled at me and lectured me so many times that I couldn't even remember all the insults. But the worst part, they would purposely leave me out during dinner. They would serve food for everyone except me. Then Linda would smirk and say, "Oh dear Emily, looks like we forgot your portion. But it's fine, you're trying to lose weight anyway, right?" Then she would laugh. She said I didn't need to eat much, but the truth was they weren't letting me eat at all. And Jake, he just sat there and ignored everything. He didn't defend me, he just ate his food like nothing was happening. In the middle of all this, the kids were the only ones who stood by my side. Noah would offer me some of his food, saying, "Here, you can have this instead." Even Ethan, who usually didn't talk to me much, would quietly say, "This is really good," and place some of his food on my empty plate. When Robert and Linda saw this, they were not happy. But I ignored their disapproving looks and accepted Ethan and Noah's kindness. I think the only thing that kept me going was the kids being on my side. Without them, I might have broken down a long time ago. But no matter what, Robert and Linda's bullying never stopped. Little by little, I felt more and more trapped. And as always, my husband was completely useless. Actually, Jake was on his parents' side. The other day, he even told me, "Don't embarrass my mom and dad too much." It was as if he blamed me just because the kids gave me their food, making Robert and Linda realize how cruel they were being. But wasn't that the truth? They were bullying me. So why was I always the one being blamed? I couldn't talk to anyone about how I felt. I was completely alone. I thought about divorcing Jake, but I couldn't bring myself to do it because Lily had just been born. As I kept struggling with these thoughts, time passed. Before I knew it, 2 years had gone by. In that time, I had lost about 33 pounds. My body had been healthy before, so losing that much weight made me look sickly. My face and cheeks had become noticeably thinner. Since I wasn't eating properly, people at work started to notice. They were worried about my health. One of the HR staff even scheduled a meeting with me, thinking I might be getting harassed at work. Every time they asked, I forced a smile and said, "Everything's fine." I acted like nothing was wrong. But deep down, I knew the truth. Everything was wrong. There were too many problems, and I was drowning in them. I didn't even know what the real problem was anymore. Then one day after New Year's, Ethan, now 15 years old, suddenly spoke to me. Are you okay? Are you sure you're not pushing yourself too much?" I was shocked. I never thought Ethan really liked me, so I never tried to bother him. That's why, even after living together for years, there was still a distance between us. But now, hearing such kind words from him, I started thinking back. Ethan had always been there for me. Even when Robert and Linda treated me badly, even when we barely spoke, he would still quietly share his food with me. He also took such good care of Lily. He was truly dependable. So when he asked me if I was okay, tears welled up in my eyes. I cried and cried, as if all the pain I had been holding in finally burst out. I knew it was embarrassing to break down in front of a 15-year-old, but I couldn't stop. Between sobs, I told Ethan everything I had been keeping inside for so long. He just listened quietly, and in that moment I realized something. Ethan, a teenage boy, was more reliable than my own husband, a grown man. When I finished talking, Ethan finally spoke. "What do you want to do, Mom? Do you want to leave him?" I want a divorce," I admitted. "I just want to get away from him and his parents." "I think that would be the best thing for you, Mom. You've suffered enough." Hearing those words made me cry even more. But at the same time, I felt relieved. After talking to Ethan, I finally found the courage to ask Jake for a divorce. All I wanted was to take Lily and get far away from him and his awful parents. When Jake heard my decision, his face turned red with anger. He yelled at me, but in the end, he just snapped, "Fine. Do whatever you want. I don't care anymore," and signed the papers. We agreed that I would leave the house in a week so I could pack my things and Lily's. While I was busy packing, Ethan spoke to me again. "If it's possible, and if it's okay with you, could you take us with you?" I looked at him confused. "What do you mean?" "Well, actually." Then he told me something that broke my heart. That man burned all the photos of our mom that Noah and I treasured so much. Those were the only memories we had of her. He also never let us visit our grandparents on Mom's side. Even after she passed away, we still haven't been able to see them properly. Plus, we haven't even been allowed to visit our own mom's grave. Our grandparents have been wanting to see us, but that awful man keeps telling them not to come. He's keeping us away from our own family. I was completely shocked and speechless. Robert and Linda were terrible, but my husband was just as bad as them. I really wanted to take Ethan and Noah with me. When I told Ethan this, he looked relieved and even laughed a little. It was the first time I had ever seen his real, happy smile. "Thank you so much," he said. "And I'm really sorry for being so distant and cold toward you all these years." For the first time, I truly felt like his mother. Then Noah spoke up. "I want to go with you too, Mom." At that moment, I became more determined than ever to take them both with me. I contacted their mom's family and took Ethan and Noah to meet their grandparents. When their grandparents saw them after so many years, they burst into tears. They told me they had always worried about the boys and wanted to see them so badly. I explained that I was divorcing Jake and wanted to take Ethan and Noah with me. Their grandparents immediately agreed. Not only that, their aunts and uncles also offered to help me financially, knowing I'd soon be a single mother. It was the most generous offer I had ever received, so I accepted their help. Ethan and Noah were overjoyed. Now that they could finally see their grandparents whenever they wanted, they smiled in a way I had never seen before. A few days later, we had a big family meeting at Robert and Linda's house. For Lily's safety, I left her at my parents' house. Jake had a terrible temper, and I was afraid he might lash out and scare her when he got angry. When I told Robert and Linda about the divorce, they exploded in rage. They yelled horrible things at me. "What kind of wife and mother are you? I've never met anyone as awful as you. Do you think our son is just an ATM for you? I told Jake not to marry someone like you. I knew you were bad news from the start. You selfish, irresponsible woman. You should rot in hell. My God, I feel like I was tricked into letting my son marry you. I can't believe you turned out to be such a horrible woman. I feel like I've been scammed." How could they ignore all the terrible things they had done to me over the years and still have the nerve to say such things? I ignored the harsh words from Jake, Robert, and Linda and asked, "Am I getting custody of Lily?" I tried to keep the conversation going, but Robert and Linda clearly didn't like that their insults weren't affecting me. They said, "Yeah, take Lily with you," but it sounded like I didn't care at all. I guess they didn't want her because she was a girl, and girls aren't seen as important for their family legacy. All right then, that's it. You've packed your stuff, so get out. I'm glad someone like you will be gone from our house. That's when Ethan spoke up. I have something to say." What do you want?" "Ethan and I are leaving with Mom." "What? What are you talking about?" "No, we're not staying here anymore. You ignore everything horrible you've done to Mom. But from our view, she's been a much better parent than you." "What did you just say, you little?" How dare you talk to your own father like that? You want me to just listen to me and obey. And that's exactly what I can't stand about you. Ethan said sharply. You try to control everything, even Mom, who passed away because of you. She suffered so much, and in the end, she took her own life because of you. And not just you, Robert and Linda, it's your fault too. You used to treat our mother just like you treat Mom now. Did you think we wouldn't notice just because we were kids? You're all terrible people, and we're ashamed to be related to you. Ethan's words hit Jake, Robert, and Linda hard. Robert and Linda went silent, looking down, but Jake was shaking with anger. His pride made him shout, "Shut up. I don't want anything to do with you and Ethan anymore. Get out, all of you." Seeing Jake lose control didn't scare me anymore. Before we left, we all glared at Jake, and I said, "Looks like we won't be seeing each other again. Goodbye," and we left the house together. I still wanted to get what I could, so I hired a lawyer and filed for compensation for the emotional harm Jake, Robert, and Linda caused me, along with child support. After that, I moved into a new apartment with my dear Ethan, Noah, and Lily. Thanks to the support from Ethan and Noah's grandparents, aunts, and uncles, and the child support, we managed to settle into a nice apartment. Each of the kids had their own rooms, and I had my own room too. Being a single mom will come with its challenges, but with my sons and daughter by my side, we will face them as a family and get through it together. Thank you for watching till the end. Please subscribe to our channel. We hope to see you in the next video.
After the somber funeral for my father, a prominent shareholder, my brother-in-law caught us off guard by raising the delicate topic of inheritance. The focus shifted to stocks and a substantial $5 million bequest, confidently asserting that my wife, the eldest daughter, and my sister was set to inherit this windfall. The revelation initially filled her with joy at the prospect of a significant inheritance. However, their excitement was short-lived when the family lawyer delivered the disheartening news that my brother-in-law had no legitimate claim to the inheritance. I, Greg Johnson, a 42-year-old office worker, reflected on my father's vibrant life. Despite his age of 78, he remained full of vitality, actively engaged in his work. My older sister, a perpetual source of trouble, led a carefree life, causing continuous worry for our parents. In her middle age, she introduced Aaron Corner, a man she intended to marry. Despite his youth and handsomeness, I couldn't warm up to him due to his demeanor. My sister demanded that our father finance her wedding, swiftly depleting the funds and unapologetically seeking more. A year after her marriage, tragedy struck. Our father collapsed while playing golf and passed away a few days later. Overwhelmed by grief, I found myself struggling with the funeral preparations, with no assistance from my sister. After the funeral, a lawyer visited our home to discuss the inheritance outlined in my father's will. While my mother and I were already aware of its contents, my sister and brother-in-law were oblivious until then. They shockingly claimed that the stocks and the $5 million inheritance should go to my wife. Stunned and speechless, my mother and I were taken aback. The lawyer corrected them, revealing that my brother-in-law had no right to inherit. Surprised and disappointed, my sister and her husband expressed disbelief and shock. The lawyer dropped another bombshell. My sister and I did not share the same father. This revelation left my sister furious, demanding an explanation from our mother, who wore an indescribable expression. The long-held family secret had finally come to light, leaving my sister shaken and seeking answers. "I'm sorry," our mother managed to say amidst the shaking emotions. "You are the child of my previous husband. Since childhood, my sister had teased me, claiming that Dad loved her more. Now faced with the truth, she seemed unable to accept it. However, she quickly shifted her stance, suggesting that if she was adopted, she would still have inheritance rights. Aaron chimed in, agreeing with her, yet our mother firmly denied any adoption, causing disbelief. I'm the eldest daughter, and even Dad said so, my sister angrily declared, glaring at me in response. I felt my anger intensifying as I countered my sister's insatiable desire for more, despite the considerable amount of money our dad had already given her. My brother-in-law chimed in, supporting her claim and stating that it's natural to spend money on one's daughter. However, the lawyer intervened, drawing attention to the questionable spending, including debt repayment, and suggested reviewing the will. My sister panicked, claiming ignorance about any will. It turned out that our father had wanted to discuss and decide the contents with the family, but she had skipped it for frivolous reasons. When the lawyer proposed reviewing the will, my sister and her husband reluctantly agreed. The will clearly stated the transfer of property to my mother and me, explaining why my sister was not adopted. Her mistreatment of me and reckless spending had disappointed our father, realizing she had no right to the inheritance. My sister was visibly shocked, and her brother-in-law, who had initially supported her, suddenly changed his tune, accusing her of lying and abruptly leaving the room. In her anger, my sister blamed our mother for not asking to have her adopted, claiming it was unfair that only Mom received the inheritance. Frustrated, she cried and screamed, expressing her disappointment. Despite my sister's outrageous behavior, the lawyer remained calm, explaining that as the biological son, I had the right to receive it all. Before things escalated further, he warned that the police might need to be involved if the situation continued. My sister appeared startled by the mention of the police, given her history of repeated theft. As my mother spoke tearfully to her, she clicked her tongue and left the room. Half a year passed, and the inheritance proceedings were completed without issue. Despite some grumbling from my sister and brother-in-law, they couldn't stand against the lawyer's efficiency. My mother gave my sister a small amount of money, but I had no intention of interfering. The frustrating part for our family was that the two had disappeared. Their blatant greed was so evident that even our relatives were lost for words. One day, my wife suggested that my mother, daughter, and I go out to eat. Since my father's passing, our mother had been down, but she showed smiles when with her granddaughter. I suggested to my mother, "Why don't you live with us?" But you know, Rook still comes home occasionally. Sis only comes around to beg for money, doesn't she? How long does she plan to keep this up? The reason my mom defends my sister is that she is her blood-related child, and there might be concern that if we visit our family home, my sister might cause trouble again. Understanding that, I told her to take her time thinking about it and then drove my mom to our family home. Upon arrival, we encountered something unexpected. The lights were on in our supposedly empty home. It wasn't the time for the helper to come, so we were puzzled. I parked the car, suggesting, "Let's go up and have some coffee with Mother." We got out of the car and headed to the entrance, but the moment we approached the door, a car came rushing in. "Mom, watch out." Hearing my daughter ahead of me, I shielded my wife with my body. The car just grazed me, and I managed to dodge it, but I collided with a nearby flower bed, injuring myself badly. The car stopped after hitting the garage door. "Are you okay, Dad?" My wife and daughter rushed over, supporting me. Mother was trembling in shock at the sudden event. Understandably, from that moment on, a day of turmoil began. I was taken to the hospital by ambulance and had to be hospitalized briefly. Later, I heard that Aaron Warner, my brother-in-law, was driving the car. According to the police, he explained that he mistook the accelerator for the brake. However, I had my doubts about that story. Amidst all of this, my sister and mother visited me in the hospital. Mother left briefly to arrange flowers, and during that time, my sister coldly looked at me and said, "You're only tough and bodied, huh?" With a slightly disappointed tone, I couldn't help but give her a smile. "If I had died in the accident, Mom would inherit everything, right? Messed up your plan," I said a bit sarcastically, and my sister looked uneasy. "You planned this, didn't you?" When I asked, my sister looked away, and I added, "But I won't be accepting Mom's share, so it won't work out for you." My sister looked surprised at this. She probably thought I would naturally accept it. I have a wife and kids, so I passed the inheritance to them. It's not strange for the head of the family to think that way. Even so, I've made a will early, like Dad did. My sister was taken aback at this. "What? So that means—" "Yeah, unfortunately, My share of the inheritance won't go to Mom. My sister stared at me, then began to shake with anger. There's $5 million, right? You could at least share a bit. When I immediately refused, my sister furiously grabbed my collar. I'm your sister. We should split it. Whether it was the amount of the inheritance that drove her mad, she continued to scream in a very aggressive voice. I felt pity for my sister. It's that greedy attitude that disappointed Dad. Don't you get it? My sister's face turned even redder, and she grabbed my neck. Bro, stop it. Mother, who had just returned, scolded her loudly. Then the nurses, called by the nurses' call button, arrived and escorted my sister out of the room. Mother seemed to want to protect my sister, but my sister had lashed out at her too. As she left, she asked, "Why did she turn out like this?" Hearing Mother say this sadly, I felt a pain in my heart. Later, Mother's health deteriorated, and she fell off, gradually weakening. My wife and I started visiting the family home more frequently to support her, but this seemed to upset my sister. Probably she encountered my wife when coming to ask for money or heard about it from Mother. One day, my sister called my cell phone. "From now on, we will take care of Mom. You guys don't need to come. Watch this." All of a sudden, however, my sister wasn't listening and said, "We've already decided," before hanging up. My wife told me she had been turned away by my sister. Too concerned about how my sister, who had no experience in household chores or living, would manage, I quickly contacted Mother. To my surprise, I found out that my brother-in-law had experience in caregiving. Mother was still independent, not yet in a worrying state. This reassured me. However, within just a month, Mother was rushed to the hospital in an ambulance. It was said to be due to a medication dosage error. When we rushed to the hospital, Mother was shockingly weak. The doctors also seemed puzzled by her condition. I couldn't recall such a mistake ever happening before. Leaving my wife to care for Mother, I went to our family home, which was in a terrible state. Despite my mother's love for cooking, the usually well-stocked fridge was shockingly empty. Even the helper had been swiftly dismissed. Feeling ashamed of trusting my sister even a little, anger surged within me. Checking the safe where valuables were kept, I discovered a large amount of money missing from Mother's passbook. The passbook with the inheritance was secure in a bank locker, but there was hardly any money left for living expenses. Returning to my mother, I explained the situation and revealed my sister's betrayal. Brooke did such a thing. Mother seemed unaware of the passbook issue and showed a shocked expression. When asked about the medication error, she explained that my brother-in-law had prepared it and looked troubled. "Mom, I don't think you should let them into that house. They claimed they would take care of you, but the state of that house was the worst. And you've gotten so frail. Haven't they been feeding you properly?" Speaking with concern, I hung her head. "Mom, let's live together. I'll build a new house, and we can live there together." Moved by my suggestion, Mother shed tears. However, her condition continued to worsen. Despite the doctor's best efforts, they, along with my sister, seemed to weigh heavily on her. Ultimately, Mother passed away without recovering. When I went to the family home for the funeral, all the valuable items had disappeared. It seemed that my sister and brother-in-law, in need of money, had taken them. Standing in the desolate place, I was overcome with anger. I had to find a way to make my sister take responsibility for Mother's sake and as atonement for what she had done. I resolved to do something. The day after Mother's funeral, my sister and I met at the lawyer's office to discuss the inheritance. Condolences, but as her daughter, I'm entitled to Mother's inheritance. My sister said with a sense of superiority that made me laugh involuntarily. She seemed to be under some misconception. "Let's open the will then." As the lawyer revealed the contents of the will, my sister turned pale. "You're joking. Why, bro? You are not entitled to any of the inheritance. This is in accordance with Dad's wishes." My brother-in-law started to get angry, but the lawyer had nothing else to say except repeat the same thing. "This must be a mistake. Bro is her child, isn't she?" My brother-in-law suddenly became furious, throwing things off the table. "Are you trying to trick us? We won't let you get away with this. Give us the inheritance now. Aaron, you planned to kill Mother, didn't you? When I asked, my brother-in-law glared at me unpleasantly. Oh, I wouldn't do such a thing. Then why did the medication error occur? My brother-in-law appeared annoyed. I don't know anything about that. It's impossible that I can inherit. You must have done something. My sister was getting more agitated. Now I'm even behind on my condo payments. I was shocked. She hadn't rushed to Mother's side after hearing of her death because she was busy with such matters, hoping for the inheritance. Really, there's nothing left. My sister pressed the lawyer. That seems to be the case. Let me explain in detail. The lawyer explained the details of the inheritance. Ultimately, after deducting what my sister had withdrawn and sold, there was hardly anything left for her to inherit. My sister held her head in dismay. I had discussed this in advance with the lawyer. I found satisfaction with the outcome. Stop joking. There can't be so little. My mother and I hadn't told my sister, but most of Mother's property had already been distributed to my children, her grandchildren. Therefore, there was already little left to inherit. However, my sister kept murmuring her dissatisfaction. I felt nothing but resentment towards my sister, who had lived off the money given by father and now mother, thinking she could rest easy knowing I would take care of her. But you just took her money. You are a true disgrace to our parents. I raised my voice in frustration. Caring for someone costs money, you know. Don't you understand? Then show me the receipts for what you spent on Mom's care. I'll cover any necessary expenses. As I extended my hand, my sister turned pale and was at a loss for words. I threw those away. That's not good. Without receipts, it can't be proven as evidence. Hearing the lawyer's words, my sister struggled to find a response. During this, my brother-in-law tried to calm me down. Greg, your sister is in a tough spot. Maybe you could help her out a bit as family. I cannot. My immediate response left my brother-in-law speechless. I've been hurt by my sister for a long time. Frankly, I feel like it's karma, but you're the only siblings, maybe just a little. He tried to say more, but I refused. I was filled with anger, and so was my brother-in-law, apparently. Dan, if that accident had worked out, Rook would have had the entire inheritance. What accident? Before I could ask, my brother-in-law started talking on his own. Because of this brother, things didn't go as planned. I was supposed to get a new car, but now there's barely enough money left even for repairs. My sister tried to stop him, but it was too late. That's a pretty serious statement. You could be accused of fraud. The lawyer held a recorder, smirking at my sister and brother-in-law. What the heck? Isn't that against the rules to do that? You agreed to our conversation being recorded at the beginning, didn't you? Called out by his own words, my brother-in-law's face turned pale. To him, I had one thing to say. Aaron, I will be pressing charges about that accident. Don't joke. Where's the evidence? The evidence has just been provided by you. My sister, crying, began to hit my brother-in-law. You idiot! It's all your fault. Why did you say that? Later, my brother-in-law faced legal consequences for his actions. Additionally, unresolved suspicions about his past emerged, requiring police involvement. For some time, my sister, as an accomplice, was said to face lesser charges. However, struggling with her condo payments, she was turned away by relatives when she asked for money. In contrast, I chose to work earnestly and not rely on inheritance. Now, receiving stock dividends has become a small pleasure in my life. In the aftermath of the legal proceedings, the rift between my sister and me widened. The family bonds that were already strained became nearly non-existent. Despite her attempts to seek support from relatives, my sister faced a cold shoulder and her financial struggles continued. Meanwhile, I focused on building a stable and fulfilling life for my own family, working diligently. I found solace in providing for my wife and children without relying on the tumultuous inheritance battles that had plagued us. The stock dividends became not just a financial benefit, but a symbol of my commitment to a more secure and principled life. Over time, my sister's situation didn't improve. The consequences of her actions weighed heavily on her, both financially and emotionally. It became a stark reminder of the importance of responsible choices and the lasting impact they can have on one's life. As the years passed, I held no ill will towards my sister, recognizing that everyone faces their own battles and makes their own choices. Still, the events that unfolded served as a powerful lesson about the significance of integrity, responsibility, and the enduring consequences of one's actions. In the midst of the turmoil, I found strength in forging ahead with resilience, determined to create a future that wasn't tainted by past misfortunes. The dividends, once a mere financial gain, evolved into a testament to the enduring power of personal growth and the ability to rise above adversity. Life moved forward, and I embraced the opportunities to thrive, leaving behind the shadows of familial discord. The lessons learned from this chapter of my life became an integral part of shaping my values and decisions, ensuring a legacy built on principles rather than the pursuit of material gain. In the end, it was not the inheritance that defined my journey, but the choices made along the way. Choices that led to a life grounded in authenticity, resilience, and a commitment to building a better future for those I cared about the most.
Hi, I'm Maya Chin, and this is the story of how my small family restaurant became one of the most exclusive dining spots in New York City, all because my in-laws couldn't resist tearing me down one last time. Cooking has always been my passion. Growing up in a modest Chinese-American household, I spent countless hours in our tiny kitchen, learning traditional recipes from my grandmother while adding my own contemporary twists. My parents wanted me to pursue a respectable career in medicine or law, but my heart belonged to the culinary arts. That's how I met James, my husband. He was a regular at the small Asian fusion restaurant where I worked as a sous chef. He'd come in 3 times a week, always ordering something different, always asking to compliment the chef. When we finally met, the connection was instant. He loved my innovative takes on traditional dishes, and I loved his genuine appreciation for culinary creativity. What I didn't love was his family. The Whittakers were old money, with a lineage that apparently traced back to the Mayflower, something his mother, Elizabeth, mentioned at every possible opportunity. His father, Richard, was a real estate mogul who owned half the commercial properties in Manhattan's Upper East Side. And his sister, Victoria, was a social media influencer who'd never worked a day in her life, but somehow had 3 million followers on Instagram. From the moment James introduced me, they made it clear I wasn't their kind of people. A chef? Elizabeth had said, her voice dripping with disdain. How quaint. But James stood by me, and we got married despite their objections. I thought time would heal the rift, that proving myself as a loving wife would eventually win them over. I was wrong. 5 years into our marriage, I decided to pursue my dream. With our savings and a small inheritance from my grandmother, I opened Fusion Garden, a cozy restaurant that blended traditional Asian cuisine with modern American influences. James supported me completely, even though it meant living on a tighter budget while the restaurant found its footing. The first year was tough, as it is for any new restaurant. We had good days and bad days, but slowly, we were building a loyal customer base. Food critics were starting to take notice, and our weekend reservations were usually booked solid. It wasn't a Michelin star establishment, but it was mine, and I was proud of what we were creating. Then came last year's Thanksgiving. The Whittakers insisted on hosting the entire extended family, including me and James. Usually, I tried to avoid these gatherings, but James convinced me it would be good for business networking. Dad's friends are always looking for new places to host their business dinners, he said optimistically. I should have trusted my instincts. The evening started with the usual subtle jabs. Elizabeth commented on my simple dress, which cost 3 months of profits. Victoria asking if I needed recommendations for a good plastic surgeon. She knew a great one who fixed her nose. And Richard barely acknowledging my existence. But it was during dinner that everything fell apart. So Maya, Elizabeth started, swirling her wine glass with practiced elegance. James tells me you're little. The restaurant is still operating. How surprising. I felt James tense beside me. Yes, we're doing quite well, actually. Our weekend reservations are usually... Oh, darling. Victoria cut in, scrolling through her phone. I saw your reviews online. 3 stars? That's barely passing, isn't it? Actually, 3 stars on Michelin is. I tried to explain, but Richard interrupted. Let's be honest here, he said, putting down his fork with a loud clunk that silenced the table. We've all eaten there. The food is mediocre at best. No innovation, no style, just worthless food from a worthless chef who clearly doesn't understand fine dining. The table fell silent. 20 pairs of eyes turned to me, some with pity, others with poorly concealed amusement. Dad, James started, but I placed my hand on his arm. No, Richard's entitled to his opinion, I said quietly, standing up. Though I find it interesting that someone who thinks my food is worthless has reserved a table at Fusion Garden 6 times in the past month under different names. Elizabeth's wine glass froze halfway to her lips. What's wrong, Elizabeth? Didn't think I'd recognize your husband when he came in wearing different suits, sitting at corner tables, taking detailed notes? Or did you think I wouldn't notice Victoria's anonymous food blogger friends coming in with their cameras? Richard's face had turned an interesting shade of red. We were merely conducting market research. The property your restaurant sits on is owned by the Chang Family Trust. I finished for him. My grandmother's family. Not part of your real estate empire, and not for sale. The silence that followed was deafening. Now, if you'll excuse me, I continued, placing my napkin on the table, I have a restaurant to run. A worthless one, apparently, but it's mine. I walked out of that dining room with my head held high, ignoring Elizabeth's spluttering and Victoria's furious typing on her phone. James followed me to the car, apologizing profusely, but I barely heard him. Because during those painful minutes at the Whitaker family table, a plan had started forming in my mind. A plan that would take 6 months to execute, would cost me every favor I'd ever earned in the culinary world, and would ultimately change everything. They thought my food was worthless. Fine. They wanted to conduct market research. Perfect. They didn't think I understood fine dining. Oh, they had no idea what I was capable of. That night, as James slept, I made 3 phone calls. The first was to my old mentor from culinary school, now a celebrated chef in Paris. The second was to a restaurant designer who owed me a favor. And the third was to a certain celebrity chef known for transforming restaurants. By morning, Operation Restaurant Revolution was in motion. The next 6 months would test everything I knew about cooking, business, and revenge. And the best part, the Whitakers would never see it coming. The next morning, I arrived at Fusion Garden earlier than usual. My staff could sense something had changed. There was a new energy in my movements, a spark in my eyes that hadn't been there before. They'd learn why soon enough. Team meeting in 10 minutes, I announced, tying my apron with practiced precision. Everyone needs to be there. And I mean everyone. As my staff gathered in the dining room, servers, line cooks, dishwashers, hosts, I took a deep breath and shared my vision. Over the next 6 months, we would transform Fusion Garden into something unprecedented in New York's culinary scene. But I needed their complete dedication and discretion. What I'm proposing will be the hardest work you've ever done, I told them frankly. Double shifts, late nights, endless practice. Some of you might want to leave, and I'll write glowing recommendations if you do. But if you stay, I smiled, you'll be part of culinary history. To my amazement, not a single person left. They'd seen how I treated my staff, like family, better than my actual in-laws had ever treated me. They trusted me, and that trust was about to pay off. The next few months were a blur of activity, all conducted under absolute secrecy. The restaurant designer I'd called, Marcus, worked after hours, transforming our cozy dining room into something spectacular. We replaced every table, chair, and light fixture. The walls were redone in hand-painted murals depicting the fusion of Eastern and Western culinary traditions. The kitchen was completely reorganized and equipped with state-of-the-art equipment. My old mentor, Chef Jacques, flew in from Paris twice a month to help refine our techniques and train my staff. Together, we revolutionized every recipe on the menu, elevating each dish while maintaining the soul of the original concept. We weren't just making food, we were creating edible art. But the real game changer was my third call from that night, to Gordon Ramsay's team. I'd met Gordon briefly during my culinary school days, and he'd remembered my innovative dessert fusion that won a national competition. When I explained my situation and my vision, he was intrigued enough to get involved. The plan was simple but ambitious. Gordon would feature Fusion Garden in a special episode of his new streaming series about revolutionary restaurants. But first, we had to become revolutionary. For 6 months, we operated on 2 tracks. During regular hours, we maintained our usual service, though with gradually increasing prices and limited availability of reservations. Richard continued his undercover visits, taking notes and looking smug. Victoria's blogger friends kept coming in, posting lukewarm reviews about our decent but uninspired offerings. But after hours, we were building something extraordinary. My staff trained relentlessly. Every dish was deconstructed and rebuilt. Every service pattern was choreographed to perfection. We weren't just preparing food, we were creating an experience. James watched all this with a mixture of pride and concern. "Are you sure about this?" he'd ask, seeing me return home exhausted at 3 a.m. "You don't have to prove anything to them." "This isn't about proving something," I'd reply. "This is about becoming something." Finally, after 6 months of preparation, we were ready. The restaurant closed for 2 weeks for renovations. Victoria immediately posted about how this was the beginning of the end for Fusion Garden. Richard was overheard at his country club betting on how long before we went bankrupt. Perfect. The night of our reopening, I made sure the Whittakers received a special invitation. Elizabeth's RSVP came back with a note about how they were so concerned about our struggles and would of course support family in difficult times. They arrived as a group: Richard, Elizabeth, Victoria, and several of their society friends. James met them at the door, playing his part perfectly. "Maya's in the kitchen," he said, sounding worried. "She's been acting strange lately. They sat at the best table, already smirking, ready to witness what they assumed would be my humiliation. Then the show began. The new fusion garden was unlike anything they'd ever seen. Each dish was a theatrical presentation of flavor and technique. Dim sum that levitated on magnetic plates. Soup served in hand-blown glass spheres that dissolved when touched. Traditional Chinese dishes deconstructed and rebuilt with molecular gastronomy techniques. And in the middle of service, right on cue, Gordon Ramsay walked into the kitchen. The dining room went silent as he emerged a few minutes later, sampling dishes, nodding approvingly. Camera crews captured everything, including the Whittakers' increasingly pale faces. This, Gordon announced to the cameras, is the future of fusion cuisine. Chef Maya has created something extraordinary here. Michelin should be calling any day now. Elizabeth's wine glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the floor. Victoria's phone live stream suddenly went quiet. Richard's face had turned that interesting shade of red again. Then I emerged from the kitchen, no longer in chef's whites, but in a designer dress, followed by some of the most renowned food critics in New York. They'd all been there incognito, scattered throughout the dining room. "The property offers are no longer necessary, Richard," I said quietly, stopping at their table. "Fusion Garden isn't for sale. In fact, we're expanding. That empty building next door, the one you've been trying to buy for years. I closed on it this morning. We're opening a culinary school. You can't." Richard sputtered. "Oh, and Elizabeth?" I continued. "Those reservations you've been trying to make under different names. We're booked solid for the next year. But don't worry, I've saved a permanent table for my family." I smiled sweetly. "Right next to the kitchen, where you can smell everything, but taste like anything." The episode aired 3 months later. Fusion Garden became the hottest reservation in New York overnight. We earned our first Michelin star within 6 months, with rumors of a second on the way. The culinary school opened, focusing on fusion cuisine and innovative techniques. The Whittakers? They still come in sometimes, sitting at their assigned table by the kitchen, watching as I live my dream. Victoria's followers love her posts about her talented sister-in-law. Elizabeth brags at her social clubs about how she always saw my potential. Richard even offered to invest in my next venture. I declined, of course. Some things, like self-respect and true passion, are worth more than money or social status. My grandmother taught me that, along with her recipes that started this whole journey. James and I are expecting our first child now. Yesterday, I felt the baby kick while I was developing a new dessert menu. I placed my hand on my belly and whispered, "Remember this, little one. Success isn't about proving others wrong. It's about proving yourself right." The kitchen timer dings, and I have to go. There's a new fusion dish I'm working on, combining my grandmother's secret Chiao Longbao recipe with a French soufflé technique. The critics will love it. But more importantly, I love it. And in the end, that's what makes anything truly worthless or priceless, not what others say about it, but what you know it's worth. As I head back to my kitchen, I pass the Whittakers' table. It's empty tonight, but the reservation sign is still there, a small reminder of how far I've come. Some might call it petty, keeping that table as a monument to their disdain. I call it seasoning, that extra pinch of satisfaction that makes success taste even sweeter.
People like you, with no job and a limited education, are not welcome in this household. With those words, my mother-in-law poured scalding water on me. It's hot, please stop. I involuntarily screamed, shocked by her bizarre behavior. Pouring boiling water on anyone is inexcusable. Fortunately, I suffered no burns, but it could have been a disaster. I couldn't believe my mother-in-law would resort to such extremes. Moreover, it wasn't me but my husband who was unemployed. A growing anger towards my mother-in-law's attitude surged within me. Enough is enough. If she's gone this far, I'll do as she wishes. Understood. If you insist, I have no choice. I'll leave this house, I declared. Finally, you're leaving. That makes things easier for me. My mother-in-law expressed joy, far from being remorseful. I no longer wanted to stay in such a hostile environment. I promptly packed my things and returned to my parents' home. My mother-in-law didn't know that my husband, Raffel, was unemployed or that I had been supporting the household finances. In fact, since quitting my job, I had started trading stocks and was earning about $30,000 a month. Even if I was driven out of her house, I could still live on my own without any issues. I wouldn't have any qualms being on my own. Even if she came to me in tears, struggling with living expenses, I would never lend a hand. She should regret kicking me out like this. I had married Raffel about 2 years ago. We were from the same university and had been dating since then. Both of us, graduates of the economics department, aspired to work in finance and managed to secure jobs at different brokerage companies after graduation. Despite our busy days, we maintained our relationship. 3 years later, Raffel proposed. Julia, I will definitely make you happy. Marry me. Believing that I could be happy with Raffel, I accepted. Yes, I'm looking forward to it. We decided to get married, thinking we could build a happy family together. However, Raffel then dropped an unexpected bomb. Hey Julia, would you quit your job and live with me at my parents' house? What? I don't mind quitting my job, but we're newlyweds. I'd like to live with just the two of us. I'm just worried about leaving my mother alone. I'll make sure it won't be a burden to you. Raffel's father had passed away when he was in middle school, and since then, he had lived with his mother. Being an only child, Raffel was concerned about her. Understanding his feelings, I agreed. Okay, I'll live with you. 2 weeks later, we moved into Raffel's family home. My mother-in-law, now able to live with Raffel, initially greeted us with a pleased expression. However, as soon as she looked at me, her expression clouded. She stared at me coldly, making it painfully clear that I was not welcomed. It doesn't matter. You didn't have to come here. What did I miss here? I thought I heard my mother-in-law muttering something under her breath, but I couldn't make it out clearly. I smiled and brushed it off. At this point, I began to feel a bit anxious about living with her. However, the day passed without any particular issues. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of my mother-in-law yelling at me. Are you still sleeping? Hurry up and prepare breakfast. When I looked at the clock by my bed, it was still before dawn, around 4:00 a.m., and it was still dark outside. I was surprised that she would demand breakfast so early. Why so early? Don't just laze around because you're not working. My mother-in-law scolded me, still groggy from sleep. I thought it was way too early in the morning, but I couldn't argue back and started preparing breakfast. Even while preparing breakfast, my mother-in-law kept berating me. Hurry up! Why does it take you so long? You're so slow. After 30 minutes, breakfast was finally ready. I'm sorry for making you wait. You finally finished. Can't you make it faster? My mother-in-law complained again. I wanted to retort that it was physically impossible to do it any faster, but I just smiled and shrugged it off. What is this? This soup is too salty. What is it? I don't think it's that salty. What are you saying? There's something wrong with my taste? Are you trying to kill me quickly by feeding me such salty meals? I never thought or intended such a thing. What is she talking about, and why is she so harsh on me? Curious, I mustered the courage to ask my mother-in-law. Why are you so harsh on me? What are you talking about? I don't think I'm being harsh. Or are you trying to make me the bad guy? No, that's not what I mean. I was overwhelmed by my mother-in-law's pressure and couldn't talk back. Finish eating. Start cleaning. After that, there's laundry to do, so there's no time to rest. Since then, every day, I was continually harassed by my mother-in-law, wearing me down both mentally and physically. While I was cleaning, she would say things like, "You missed the dust in the corner." When I was doing laundry, she'd complain, "There's still a stain." A month after starting to live with her, I felt like I was going to break. So I talked to Raphael about it. "It's about your mother. She's been saying mean things to me every day, and it's hard. Could you please tell her not to say such things?" But Raphael showed no reaction. I was momentarily irritated by Raphael's lack of response. But then I noticed something strange about him. He was pale, as if he had something important to say. "What's wrong? Did something happen?" When I asked, Raphael hesitantly began to speak. "Actually, I've been fired from the company." What is this, some kind of joke? I was speechless, unable to comprehend. There was a downsizing at the company, and I got laid off, according to Raphael. Due to recent economic downturns, the company's profits had plummeted, leading to unavoidable large-scale layoffs. "So you'll be unemployed from tomorrow." "Well, I can work for one more month after receiving the notice of dismissal. But after that..." Fortunately, I had been using my knowledge from my time at the securities company to trade stocks. Although I struggled at first, I was now earning about $30,000 a month, so we weren't struggling financially. I was comforting Raphael and had forgotten about all the harassment from my mother-in-law. From the next day onwards, I endured my mother-in-law's harsh treatments as Raphael lost his job. Feeling the need to be strong and support him, I continued to endure the situation. A month passed, and Raphael was officially laid off and became unemployed. He started looking for a job initially, but gradually he began to spend most of his time at home, making excuses. "Shouldn't you start looking for a job more seriously?" I suggested. "Yeah, I'm looking, but it's hard to find a good company that will suit me," Raphael replied, seemingly having no intention of actively seeking new employment. Reluctantly, I continued to support our household. As time passed, the harassment from my mother-in-law intensified, and I grew increasingly exhausted. Initially, I thought I had to endure it because Raphael was unemployed, but I no longer felt that way. I spent my days feeling listless. One day, Raphael unusually went out in the morning. Perhaps he had finally started to seriously look for a job. After seeing him off, I started cleaning as usual. "Make sure it's clean. Do it properly." My mother-in-law sipped coffee on the living room sofa, hurling sarcasm at me. Fed up, I ignored her. Suddenly, she threw a tantrum and yelled at me. "How dare you ignore me? You're just a mere daughter-in-law. You don't even have a job." Ignoring her, I continued cleaning. She grew angrier and confronted me. "Still ignoring me? Unemployed and uneducated people like you should leave this house." She yelled and then poured boiling water on me, the hot water she had prepared for her coffee. "It's hot? Please stop." I screamed involuntarily at her sudden action. Thankfully, the water wasn't super boiling hot, so I didn't suffer any burns, but it could have been a disaster. Finally reacting, she said, "This is what I've been saying. If you're not working, leave this house." She smirked as she spoke. Fed up with her behavior, I had no choice but to agree to her demand. "All right, I'll leave." "Good. That makes things easier. Leave quickly." I quickly packed my things and decided to leave that day. I no longer wanted to spend another second in that house. I left, heading straight to my parents' home. Upon arrival, my parents were surprised by the sudden visit, but welcomed me warmly. I waited for a call from Raphael, but there was neither a phone call nor a message. Feeling a bit lonely, I decided not to contact him until he reached out. A month passed since I returned to my parents' house, but there was still no contact from Raphael. My feelings for him faded, and I started considering divorce. One early morning, the doorbell at my parents' house rang. On the monitor, I saw, to my surprise, Raphael and my mother-in-law. What now, after all this time? I thought. Yes, what can I do for you? I've forgiven you. Now come back home quickly, she yelled through the intercom as usual. Forgiving me? What's she talking about? I appreciated her words, but I hadn't done anything that required forgiveness from her. After telling her that, I ended the intercom call, boiling with anger at my mother-in-law's attitude. However, they were persistent, banging on the front door violently. Don't just hang up on me. Come on, let's go back, my mother-in-law yelled. Considering the noise they were making could become a hassle to the neighborhood, I reluctantly opened the door, inviting my mother-in-law and Raphael inside after seating them on the sofa in the living room. I inquired about their unexpected visit, wondering why they were both there all of a sudden. It was my mother-in-law who had insisted that I leave, and now she was telling me to come back. The situation was perplexing, and I couldn't make any sense of it. You're the one who told me to leave. There's no way I can go back now, I asserted. My mother-in-law responded with frustration, accusing me of childish behavior and claiming to have forgiven me. She insisted that I return and stay in her house, even stating that she'd let me, an unemployed and uneducated person, stay there. But I'm not the unemployed one, it's Raphael. And if I go back, they'll take advantage of me every day. I might not be working, but what about your son, huh? I retorted. Raphael seemed surprised at this revelation. My mother-in-law appeared confused, indicating that Raphael hadn't informed her about his layoff. Pressed further, Raphael finally admitted to being laid off from the company. Apologies and explanations ensued, with Raphael justifying his actions by relying on my income for financial stability. My mother-in-law, shocked at the news, openly expressed anger toward Raphael for not finding a job yet. Why did you keep quiet about this? What are we going to do now? She scolded him. Raphael assured her that my income would suffice for the time being, causing my mother-in-law to label him as worthless for not actively seeking employment. Fed up with Raphael's excuses, I couldn't believe that I had ever thought of supporting him. When my mother-in-law suggested I come back, I vehemently rejected the idea, considering all the mistreatment I had endured. Their unexpected visit had turned into a heated argument, revealing the truth about my mother-in-law pouring boiling water on me. Raphael was shocked to learn about this incident and confronted his mother. Why did you do that? He asked her. She admitted to the act, attributing it to my ignoring her. The revelation sparked a heated exchange between Raphael and his mother, prompting me to intervene and urge them to take their arguments home. Realizing the impact of their loud arguments on someone else's house, my words prompted a change in their attitudes. Previously assertive and bold, they now pleaded with me to come back, promising that they wouldn't cause any harm again. Despite their pleas, I saw through their intentions. Raphael's promise to find a job seemed insincere, and my mother-in-law's assurance not to cause trouble appeared dubious. I voiced my skepticism, stating that their words were pointless and that they would only take advantage of me. Their silence confirmed my suspicions, and I left them in the living room, heading to my room, leaving them to contemplate their actions. When I returned to the living room 5 minutes later, they were still sitting in silence with their heads down. Frustrated by the prolonged silence, I questioned, "How long do you plan to stay quiet? It doesn't matter to me anymore." Instead of a response, Raphael signed something. I had handed him a pre-filled divorce form with my name on it. Surprised by the document, Raphael looked utterly confused. I bluntly explained, "Can't you see it's a divorce form? I'm done with someone who won't find a job and didn't even contact me after I went back to my parents' house." "Don't wait, please. This is too sudden," Raphael protested. I found his stubbornness irritating, as he seemed oblivious to the fact that his actions were the root cause of our problems. Unmoved, I affirmed, "I've made up my mind. My decision to divorce you won't change, no matter what you say." Raphael, still in disbelief, questioned if divorce was too harsh. Coldly, I responded, "I don't think so. It's your fault." I directed the same coldness toward my mother-in-law, who was partly to blame. Resigned to the situation, Rafael signed the divorce form, warning me not to regret it. However, I felt a sense of relief and I asserted that the one who might regret it was Rafael. I'll submit the divorce form. I don't want any compensation. Just go home, I declared, finalizing my divorce from Rafael. Though it may have seemed harsh, it was necessary to escape the harassment from my mother-in-law and Rafael's unemployment. 2 weeks later, while relaxing at my parents' house, I received a call from my ex-mother-in-law. She informed me that the electricity and gas had been cut off and questioned if I had done something. I explained that I had stopped paying for Rafael and her living expenses. Hoping for my assistance, she asked if I could cover it just for the month. I found her request absurd, considering we were no longer a couple and didn't live together. I firmly declined, suggesting she ask Rafael for help, as he had promised to find a job. Unable to comprehend my refusal, she pleaded for help, playing the ex-wife card. However, I remained firm, ending the call and blocking her number. Finally, I severed ties with both my ex-mother-in-law, who constantly harassed me, and Rafael, who had proven to be unreliable. Life at my parents' house became peaceful, and I focused on rebuilding my life. Months later, while checking stock charts on a holiday, I received a message from Rafael. He apologized for everything, acknowledging his reliance on me and the recent job at a factory. Despite the apology, I had no intention of getting involved with them again. Rafael mentioned his mother's continued harshness and expressed a desire for me to come back. Reading the message, I believed reconciliation was unlikely. I blocked Rafael's number. 6 months after the divorce, I started dating a man introduced by a friend. He was reliable, treated me well, and despite the age difference, we connected. While marriage was not on the immediate horizon, I cherished the happy times we spent together, focusing on the present and leaving the past behind.
Hi, I'm Mia, 30 years old, trying to keep my life balanced amidst the family chaos. Growing up, I always felt like the backdrop in a play where my sister, Sophia, took center stage. Our mom has a way of making everything feel like an audition for her approval. And let's just say Sophia always got the lead role. It's not Sophia's fault though, she's been going through a tough time after her divorce. But somehow, mom uses this as a reason to put more pressure on me. Just last week, during our dreaded Sunday family dinner, mom slipped into her usual spiral. You know, Mia, maybe if you weren't so tied down, Sophia wouldn't feel so alone. It's not healthy for her to see you and him so settled. Her words were cold, aimed to sting, and I could feel them freezing me out. I don't understand why my marriage has anything to do with Sophia's happiness. Shouldn't we be supporting her and finding her own way? I tried to keep my voice even, but inside I was boiling. Oh, come on, Mia. Maybe loosen up a bit, live a little, like Sophia. Take a break from him, she waved dismissively, as if my husband were some accessory I could toss aside. Mom, I'm not divorcing my husband just to make Sophia feel better. That's absurd. I finally snapped. Sophia, who had been quietly picking at her food, glanced up, her eyes flickering between us. You always do this, Mom shot back, her voice rising. You make everything about you. Think about your sister for once. The tension was thick, cutting through the air. But for once, Sophia spoke up. Actually, Mia has a point. Her voice was shaky but firm. I don't need her to be single to feel better. This isn't about me, is it, Mom? Silence filled the room. Mom's face tightened, her eyes narrowing as she turned to Sophia. So you're on her side now? The dinner ended in cold, clipped goodbyes. On the drive home, my husband reached over and held my hand, his silent support steadying me. But the weight of Mom's words sat heavy between us. After a long silence, he finally spoke, his voice careful. Maybe your mom has a point. If this keeps up, it could start affecting us. I sighed, watching the city lights blur outside the window. I know, but what can I do? She's my mom. I can't just cut her off, can I? He didn't answer, and we spent the rest of the drive lost in our own thoughts. The week after that disastrous dinner, tension was building like a storm. My phone buzzed incessantly with texts from Mom, each one more insidious than the last. Just heard from Janice, from book club. She saw him with someone at the cafe. They seemed close, too close. Thought you should know. I stared at the screen, disbelief turning into frustration. It was ludicrous, but the seed was planted, and that's all she needed. I needed answers, face to face. When I walked into Mom's house later that day, the air was thick with the scent of her rose candles, an ironic attempt at peace. She was in the kitchen, humming a tune, pretending nothing was wrong. "Mom, we need to talk." My voice was firm. She turned, her face a picture of practiced concern. "What's wrong, dear?" "Don't play dumb. The messages about my husband. Why are you spreading lies?" Her response was cool, detached. "I'm just looking out for you, Mia. People talk. I thought you should know. And you believe them without asking me? Without proof? You're trying to stir up trouble." My pulse quickened with anger. "Trouble? No, I'm saving you from it. Maybe you're too close to see what's really going on." Just then, Sophia walked in, catching the end of our argument. "What's going on?" "Mom's been spreading rumors that my husband's cheating based on some cafe gossip," I explained, barely containing my frustration. Sophia looked between us, torn. "Mom, why would you do that? If there's nothing to it, no harm done, right? But if there is, wouldn't you want to know?" Mom's voice was the epitome of evasion. By breaking up her marriage over rumors? Sophia's voice rose in rare defiance. "Is that how we handle things now?" Mom played her victim card. "I'm being attacked here for caring, for loving my daughters enough to make sure they aren't being deceived. How is that wrong?" I grabbed my phone, my resolve hardening. "This isn't love, Mom. It's control, and I'm not standing for it anymore." Sophia and I left together, the divide Mom tried to create between us now a bridge. As we stepped outside, the cool evening air chilled our heated faces. "I'm sorry, Mia," Sophia said quietly, "for not seeing it sooner. For everything. It's not your fault. We're in this together now, right?" I squeezed her hand, a simple gesture filled with unspoken promises. The family reunion was supposed to be a celebration, a festive gathering at our ancestral home. But as the sun dipped lower, the mood shifted, like the quiet before a storm. Mom had orchestrated the perfect scene. Flowers, fairy lights, but underneath things were far from perfect. She clinked her glass, calling for attention. "Family is everything," she began. "It's about supporting each other, making sacrifices, like Sophia, who's come out stronger after her divorce." She smiled at Sophia, who managed a weak nod, then turned her gaze to me. Her smile faded. "And then there's Mia, so settled in her little world she can't see beyond it." The murmurs grew louder, judgmental. I could feel every eye on me, the scrutiny like pinpricks on my skin. "Really, Mom? Is this necessary?" I said, my voice steady. Despite the turmoil raging inside her, Mom ignored me and pressed on. "Imagine a world where we all just thought about our own happiness, no care for how it affects others. Mia could learn a lot from Sophia's courage, don't you think?" "Mom, stop. That's enough." Sophia's voice cut through the air, sharper than I'd ever heard it. The crowd gasped, stunned. Mom looked caught off guard, her well-rehearsed script suddenly disrupted. "Why are you doing this?" Sophia continued, stepping closer to me, forming an unspoken barrier between us and Mom. "Why can't you just be happy for Mia? She's not living her life at anyone's expense. She's been supporting me more than anyone." Mom quickly recovered, her voice cold and calculated. "So you think undermining me changes the truth? Mia is selfish, and you, Sophia, are blinded by sisterly love." "I'm not blind, Mom. I see perfectly well," Sophia shot back, her usual calm replaced by a fierce defiance. "It's cruel to use a family gathering to air your biased grievances." The family around us began murmuring, tension palpable as people chose sides. Mom raised her hands in a gesture of supposed peace. "You're both my daughters, and I love you. But sometimes love means telling hard truths. Mia, you need to think about more than just yourself and your perfect little marriage." I looked around at the faces in the room, seeing confusion and concern mirrored in their eyes. My heart pounded with a mix of anger and an overwhelming need to defend my peace. "Hard truths? No, Mom, you're using your toxic assumptions and calling it love. This is manipulation, not concern," I said, my voice stronger than I expected. I won't let you tear down my life because you're unhappy with the way I live it." Silence followed. It was heavy, charged, as everyone processed what had just happened. Sophia squeezed my hand, whispering, "We'll handle this together." As conversations cautiously resumed around us, I knew what I had to do. This wasn't just about defending my choices anymore. It was about protecting my mental health and my marriage. A drastic change was necessary, and with Sophia by my side, I felt the strength to finally follow through. The days after the reunion were a whirlwind of whispered phone calls and quiet meetings between Sophia and me, united in our determination. We meticulously crafted a plan to reveal the truth about Mom's manipulations to the family. "She always talks differently when she thinks no one else is listening," Sophia noted one evening as we sat with notes scattered across the table. "Exactly," I replied, tapping my pen against my notebook. "We need to catch her in the act. Show everyone the real Mom, the one we deal with behind closed doors." Sophia's eyes brightened as she scanned her laptop. "What if we use a voice-activated recorder? We could hide it during your next one-on-one with her." I smiled. "Perfect. She's invited me for tea on Saturday, thinking it's to mend fences. Little does she know." Saturday arrived, and with it, a knot of nerves in my stomach. The recorder was hidden in my purse, discreetly positioned to capture every word. Mom greeted me with her usual tight smile and ushered me into the kitchen. As we sat down with tea between us, she didn't waste any time. "Mia, darling, I've been thinking about our little discussion at the reunion. I want to help you understand where I'm coming from." I nodded, my heart racing, knowing every word was being recorded. "Go on," she continued, her tone laced with condescension. "Sophia needs us now more than ever, and your stubborn independence could set a bad example. I'm only trying to look out for the family. And by looking out, you be trying to control my life, telling me how to be a wife." I kept my voice calm, steering her towards revealing more. "It's not just about you, Mia. Sometimes we have to make sacrifices for the greater good. If that means adjusting your life, so be it." She leaned forward, her voice dripping with a fox sincerity that made my skin crawl. The conversation went on, Mom unknowingly laying bare her manipulative mindset, all caught on tape. The following week, we gathered the family again, this time under the guise of clearing the air. The tension in the living room was thick, everyone bracing for another showdown. But this time, Sophia and I were in control. "Thank you all for coming," I began, standing with Sophia by my side. "We believe it's important for everyone to see the full picture of what's been happening." I pressed play on the recorder and Mom's voice filled the room. Her cold words, her manipulation, the calculated way she tried to control my life, it was all laid bare. As the recording ended, the room erupted in murmurs of disbelief. Mom's face paled, her usual composure shattered. "Is this true? You've been manipulating your daughters like this?" Aunt Marie asked, her tone filled with disbelief. Mom stammered, her eyes darting to the shocked and disappointed faces around her. I was just trying to." "No, Mom, you were caught," Sophia said, her voice unwavering. "This is who you are, and it's why things need to change." As the family absorbed the revelation, their murmurs grew louder. One by one, they began sharing their own feelings, perspectives that had been suppressed for years. Sophia and I exchanged a glance. It was done. The truth had been revealed, not to punish, but to protect and heal. The path forward wouldn't be easy, but it was necessary. The bonds between us, once strained by manipulation, could now be rebuilt on a foundation of honesty and courage. As the echoes of the recording faded, the room felt charged, waiting for Mom to respond. She stood visibly shaken, her usual poise crumbling under the weight of her exposed actions. I did it for the family," she stammered, her voice thin and unsteady. "To keep us together, to make us strong." Uncle John shook his head, his face etched with disbelief. "That's not strength, that's control. Manipulating Mia and Sophia doesn't keep the family together. It tears it apart." Aunt Marie added, disappointment clear in her voice, "You've always been the matriarch, yes, but this. We never imagined it went this far. Guiding your children is one thing. Controlling their lives is another." Mom's eyes darted around the room, seeking an ally, but found none. Even Sophia, her once staunch supporter, stood firmly by my side. "Mom, we needed you to be our support, not our puppeteer," Sophia said, her voice steady and resolute. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of hushed conversations and quiet reassurances among family members. All except for Mom, who sat isolated, the weight of her actions settling heavily around her. In the weeks that followed, the family dynamic shifted dramatically. Invitations to Mom were polite but distant, and her once central role in family decisions faded. She was invited out of courtesy, not desire, her influence now reduced to mere formality. During this time, Sophia and I grew closer, rebuilding the relationship that Mom had almost destroyed. We spent hours sharing our thoughts, fears, and hopes for the future, laying the groundwork for a bond no longer defined by rivalry or manipulation. One evening, as my husband and I hosted a small dinner with Sophia, he raised his glass, a light smile on his face. To new beginnings and to family, the kind we build on trust and support, not manipulation. "I'll drink to that," I said, clinking glasses with him, then with Sophia. "We've been through a storm, but we're here, stronger and together." Sophia nodded, the candlelight reflecting in her eyes. "It's strange how things turned out, but I'm grateful. We could have lost so much more if not for the truth." As the night wore on, we talked about healing, not just for ourselves, but for Mom too, if she ever sought it sincerely. For now, though, it was about us, about setting the foundation for a future where manipulation held no sway. The ordeal had not only mended my relationship with Sophia, but also strengthened my marriage. My husband and I understood each other better now, our commitment deepened by the challenges we had faced together. We had weathered the storm and emerged with a resilience and clarity that bound us even closer. Tonight, I had planned to unwind at a play, but my mother-in-law had different ideas. She arrived unexpectedly, accompanied by 9 friends, assuming they could all stay at my house while I was out. Despite my prior plans, she insisted on leaving their belongings at my place and asked if I could prepare dinner and sleeping arrangements for everyone, as if my evening was theirs to commandeer. Caught off guard by her audacity, and the necklace she wore, a piece I held dear, my frustration boiled over. I couldn't take it anymore. "I'm actually about to leave for a trip," I informed her, watching her surprise unfold. That was the breaking point. After enduring her relentless demands, I finally asserted myself. "Please return that necklace." It was time to establish the respect and boundaries I had long overlooked. My name is Julie, a 32-year-old who transitioned from an administrative role to teaching computer classes after getting married. My husband, Eric, manages his father's company and often seems preoccupied with its challenges. Our cherished moments together, like movie dates, bring him visible relief, a sight that warms my heart. Although I've always been more of a listener than a talker, Eric encourages me to voice my thoughts more confidently. My older brother has always been protective, which I once found stifling. Now, I see it as a form of support, much like what Eric provides. Eric's brother serves as vice president of their father's company, and his wife, Catherine, who is about my age, is also part of our intertwined lives. Catherine has always been someone I admire, ambitious, dependable, and kind-hearted. What truly stands out about her is her assertiveness and the way she confidently expresses her views, coupled with a remarkable ability to be understanding and adaptable. Witnessing her stand up to our mother-in-law was nothing short of impressive. Unfortunately, Catherine and her husband live quite far away, which means I don't see her as often as I'd like, a fact I often regret. On the other hand, my mother-in-law carries herself as if she owns the company. As the president's wife, she exudes confidence, but her stubbornness and arrogance are unmistakable. She frequently pressures me, insisting, "Julie, you're Eric's wife, the president. You should quit your job as a computer instructor and fully support your husband." While Eric stands by my choices, her dissatisfaction is palpable, and I'm thankful we don't live too close to her. I've always envisioned a simple, peaceful life with Eric, perhaps even with children in the future. However, everything changed when Eric's father unexpectedly passed away from a heart attack. It was a shock to us all, leaving Eric and his brother to navigate the future of the family business. During this turbulent time, Eric decided to relocate to Philadelphia to work at the company's main office, while his brother stepped up as the new president, with Eric becoming vice president. We found a cozy house in Philadelphia, slightly removed from the hustle and bustle and a bit far from the nearest train station, but it promised a peaceful, sunlit life. With all the changes at work, Eric often came home late, so I took it upon myself to ensure our home was a warm and welcoming place. I prepared healthy meals to support Eric during these challenging times, and as the weeks turned into a month, his appreciation for my efforts became increasingly evident. "I'm back. I'm starving," he would announce as he entered the house, to which I would respond with a smile. "Thanks for working so hard. I'll make dinner." One day he mentioned, "Hey, Julie, my mom wants to visit this weekend. Is that okay?" Knowing she might be feeling lonely after the loss of Eric's father, I was more than willing to welcome her. "Of course," I replied, although I was aware that we still had some tidying up to do. "She's welcome," I assured him, and he quickly said he'd let his mom know. He then suggested inviting his brother and Catherine too, to which I happily agreed. It might sound odd, but relocating here meant I could see Catherine more often, which turned out to be a delightful surprise. That weekend, we gathered to catch up and reminisce about my father-in-law. It was a bittersweet occasion. While we all felt the loss deeply, I didn't want to dwell on sadness forever. "My mother has picked up a new hobby," Eric's mother shared, her effortless elegance shining through as she spoke. Today, she wore a stylish, light purple scarf that added to her commanding presence, even if she seemed a bit thinner than before. Her authority was especially noticeable when she offered advice to Eric and his brother on business matters since the passing of my father-in-law. I noticed that Eric's mother became more exacting with me. "Julie, we're running out of drinks. Could you go buy some?" she directed at me. Just then, Catherine offered to go instead. "Oh, could you? That would be helpful," she replied to Catherine, her tone noticeably softer than how she spoke to me. I suspected she was struggling with her grief, so I chose to overlook her sharp comments for the moment. After dinner, Eric kindly drove everyone home, marking the end of the evening. However, this was just the beginning of more frequent visits from my mother-in-law, who soon began critiquing how I maintained the house, voicing complaints about Catherine, and even rummaging through her fridge uninvited. "Julie, Eric is so busy right now. You should be careful with the meals you prepare for him. What if he gets sick too?" she cautioned me one day, followed by a remark about some leftover trash. "Can't you clean up properly?" Her criticism seemed endless, a way to pass the time, but it was always directed at me, never at Catherine, who she would quickly dismiss with claims of other engagements. It wasn't that she disliked me. Perhaps it was simply easier for her to boss around someone who seldom argued back, unlike Catherine, who always stood her ground. This environment made me consider getting the job just to spend less time at home. However, even after securing a position, the situation with my mother-in-law only intensified. "Julie, we're out of teriyaki sauce, so pick some up while you're out," she commanded, even as she brought leftovers to take back with her. Her sense of entitlement often left me speechless, especially knowing she could easily afford such things herself. Then one day, a deeply cherished necklace, a keepsake from my mother, vanished from its usual spot. My immediate suspicion fell on my mother-in-law, who was frequently at our house and seemed too familiar with where I kept my belongings. After a fruitless search, I reluctantly confronted her, only to be met with fierce anger. "You probably lost it yourself. How dare you accuse me? What kind of person are you?" she shouted. I tried to explain that the necklace was a special keepsake from my mother and held immense sentimental value for me, but her response only deepened the wound. "I don't care, it's just a necklace. Why don't you ask Eric to buy you a new one?" Realizing she couldn't grasp the importance of the necklace, I decided to drop the subject. But then more things began to disappear, money from my wallet and various items around the house. Despite keeping a wary eye on her, I never caught her in the act. Exhausted and confused, I confided in Catherine, who agreed that my mother-in-law was the likely culprit, given that no one else had such access to our home. It saddened me to think that way, but without concrete evidence, I felt powerless. Seeing how troubled I was, Catherine suggested a getaway. "You need a break, Julie. Why not join me for a short vacation?" The idea of stepping away from it all was appealing. I felt drained, and the thought of a little escape was rejuvenating. So 3 weeks later, as Eric and his brother prepare for a business trip to meet with a company in another state, Catherine and I finalize our plans. "I'm heading out, Julie. Just relax and enjoy your time," Catherine encouraged as we got ready. "Take care," I replied, grateful for the chance to recharge and hopeful that a little distance might offer some perspective on the chaotic happenings at home. I packed early, eager for the respite that awaited. My travel bag was ready by the door, and I was just about to leave when the doorbell rang. Curious, I checked the video feed and saw my mother-in-law standing at the door, not alone but with a group of friends in tow. Hi, Julie. I brought some friends. Can you let us in? She greeted me as if it were a normal visit. Opening the door, I found her and about 9 friends, all laden with heavy bags. We're staying over tonight. Make us feel comfortable, she announced, as if it were a done deal. Didn't I mention? We're going to see a play nearby tonight, and since it ends late, we decided to stay here, she added casually. This was completely unexpected, especially since I was about to leave for my plans when my mother-in-law interrupted. Oh, did I inconvenience you? Kayla told me you were okay with it, she said, trying to justify her imposition. I was taken aback by her audacity. I'm sorry, but I wasn't informed about this, and I already have plans, I replied, trying to maintain my composure. She seemed surprised but quickly retorted, but you'll be back soon, right? We'll just drop our bags and go out for a while. Can you make dinner and set up beds for us? Ignoring my stated plans, she acted as if everything was already settled. I can't. I'm going on a trip with Catherine. Oh, just for Catherine? You can go anytime. We've come all this way just for today. How long are you going to make us wait? She persisted, completely disregarding my needs. Then something caught my eye, a glint of metal around her neck. It was the necklace, a cherished memento from my mother. Wait. That necklace you're wearing, I began, my voice trailing off in shock. To my astonishment, it was indeed the same necklace. Kayla, where did you get that necklace? I asked, trying to keep my composure. Why, it's just one of my collections. Is there a problem? She replied smugly, clearly enjoying the control she felt she had. That can't be right. That necklace is rare and a limited edition. I countered, feeling a mix of anger and betrayal. Just then, Catherine arrived, puzzled as to why I hadn't met her as planned. I was wondering why you didn't show up at our meeting place and didn't contact me. So this is what was happening, she said upon entering. I'm sorry I couldn't get in touch, I replied, the stress evident in my voice. Noticing my distress, Catherine quickly picked up on the tension. What's going on? She asked, her eyes darting between me and the necklace. I was upset and blurted out, the necklace she's wearing is the same one that belonged to my mother, the one that recently went missing, the one I kept in that special box. I explained, barely holding back tears. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Catherine spoke up loudly enough for everyone to hear, reinforcing the significance of the necklace and its sudden, mysterious appearance around my mother-in-law's neck. In a hushed voice, desperate to keep the matter from her friends, my mother-in-law whispered, "Can you both stop this? It's embarrassing. Do you want to accuse me of theft?" Her face flushed with indignation. "Yes, I find it suspicious," Catherine replied firmly, not backing down. "Do you have any proof that I stole it?" My mother-in-law shot back. "It's embarrassing to have such unreasonable daughters-in-law. Please don't make a scene in front of my friends." She then turned back to her group with a forced smile. "Well, let's go inside, everyone," she attempted to usher her friends inside. A crucial detail flashed in my mind. "Kayla, can I have a look at the necklace, please?" I asked, needing to confirm my suspicion. Catherine circled behind her for a closer look. "Enough of this. What's your mother's name?" My mother-in-law snapped, trying to dismiss us. "It's Amanda." There it was. I spotted the engraving. "The initials AR are right here," I pointed out. Upon seeing the engraving, her friends looked horrified and began to distance themselves. "Stop this. I didn't come here for this. Let's go, everyone," my mother-in-law urged, her tone frantic. "We're not letting you leave," Catherine declared firmly, blocking her path. The friends, sensing the growing tension, muttered, "We're not involved," and quickly made their way toward the subway. "There's been some mistake," my mother-in-law stammered, attempting to follow her friends, but she was stopped by an unexpected presence. "What are you doing here? Weren't you supposed to be on a business trip?" Eric stood there, his arrival surprising everyone. It turned out that his supposed business trip was scheduled for the next day. He had given his mother a false date to see how she would act, a plan devised after Catherine informed him about the missing items from our home. Having visited his childhood home and found similar items missing, Eric had begun to suspect theft. but without concrete evidence, he knew any accusation could easily be denied. "What are you doing here?" Eric demanded. "I was just leaving," she replied, attempting to escape the situation. "Give it back. That necklace isn't yours. It's a keepsake from my parents." "Why do you have it, Ma?" I demanded. "It's not what you think. I found it in my purse. Julie must have set me up," she claimed, trying to shift the blame to me, panic evident in her voice. "Do you think such a lie would work? There's no way Julie would do something like that. First, give the necklace back to Julie. We'll talk after that," Eric insisted. Reluctantly, she removed the necklace and threw it on the ground, then tried to flee. "Hey, wait," we called out, starting to chase her but stopping shortly after. We didn't need to chase her. The truth had already caught up with her. I was bewildered as about 15 police officers stood before my mother-in-law. The scene was surreal, and I struggled to grasp what was unfolding. Then one officer explained, "We received a report from a local resident. They said someone was causing a disturbance here and was often seen entering this house when the owners were away. They asked us to come quickly." "What are you talking about? I'm the mother of the son living here," my mother-in-law retorted, clearly annoyed. "Wait, what do you mean she entered when we weren't home?" I questioned, my curiosity piqued. "I never did such a thing," I interjected, trying to clarify that her visits were always while we were present. The police then shared more. "The informant saw her sneaking into your backyard, likely using a spare key to get inside." Indeed, we had a hidden spare key under a plant pot in the backyard. This revelation sent a chill down my spine and suddenly made sense of the missing items. Eric had suspected something and planned to observe her actions today, but this turn of events was beyond his expectations. "Mom, why were you coming into our house when we weren't home?" Eric demanded an answer. "It's all lies. Are you going to believe some unknown person's story over me?" She shot back. "But you did have my precious necklace, didn't you?" I pressed her further. "Told you I found it in my purse." My mother-in-law maintained her story. One officer intervened. "Let's talk about this at the station." "But I didn't do anything," she pleaded. "Mom, stop this. I can't understand why you did this," Eric said, his tone firm. Hearing her son's words, my mother-in-law seemed momentarily defeated and collapsed to the ground. But just when it appeared she had given up, she burst into a rage. "After your father passed away, I felt so lonely. Seeing her always so cheerful, I couldn't stand it anymore. I wanted her to feel the pain I felt." She confessed her emotions, raw and turbulent, and Eric was visibly shaken by her irrational justification. Sensing the need to address the situation directly, I stepped in front of an increasingly upset Eric. "Kayla, I understand where you're coming from. Perhaps I've been too dismissive of our interactions. However, stealing and causing distress is an entirely different matter. Did you intend to upset me? Is that what you aimed for?" "Don't be ridiculous," she snapped back. "Do you find joy in pushing someone to their limits with such twisted actions? Does it fill the void of your loneliness?" I asked, trying to grasp the depth of her actions. "Shut up. What do you know about me?" she yelled, unwilling to confront the reality of what she had done. "If you're feeling low, you should just tell us. We can't read minds." I attempted to calm her with reason. "Don't mock me. Why would I confide in you, you useless daughter-in-law?" she retorted angrily. "Mom, Julie has a point," Eric chimed in, trying to mediate. As the tension escalated, the police, observing the situation deteriorate, intervened and suggested we relocate to the station. "Are you actually going to arrest me? I can't believe this," she protested vehemently. However, due to multiple eyewitness reports of her unauthorized entry and the suspicion of theft connected to her possession of my belongings, the police decided to detain her. My mother-in-law was arrested on charges of unlawful entry and theft, continuing to assert her innocence. She demanded legal representation and refused the meals provided during her visit. Her father expressed disappointment and encouraged her to sincerely contemplate her actions. His stern reprimand prompted her to tearfully apologize, showing a rare moment of submission to his authority, the only one she seemed unwilling to defy. He cautioned her that without genuine introspection, she shouldn't expect a welcoming return home. Reluctantly, she appeared to acknowledge the gravity of her situation. Perhaps the loss of her husband had left my mother-in-law adrift, with her flashy attire and jewelry serving as armor against her insecurities. I pondered whether her desperate treatment of me and my sister-in-law was merely a facade to mask her vulnerabilities. Nonetheless, her unchecked desires and poor impulse control were distinct issues, and it was evident that her flawed judgments had led to this unfortunate situation. I was stunned by how quickly things had escalated, especially after discovering that my mother-in-law had been using the spare key to enter our home surreptitiously. The thought of someone intruding into our personal space uninvited was deeply unsettling. Thankfully, our vigilant neighbors across the street, particularly the wife who worked from home, noticed her suspicious behavior and reported it. I am immensely grateful for their brave intervention, which has since allowed us to live more peacefully and ensured our safety. We updated our home security by changing all the locks and stopped placing a spare key outside. Eric decided it was best to sever ties with his mother, insisting that she refrain from contacting us in the future. He even warned that legal measures would be taken if she attempted to reach out. After her release, she returned to her childhood home in the countryside and surprisingly adopted a simpler way of life, a stark contrast to her previously extravagant lifestyle. Under the watchful eye of her father, she began to contribute to household chores from dawn. I genuinely hope this change allows her to contemplate her past actions. In the meantime, my father moved in with us primarily to safeguard against any unexpected visits from my mother-in-law. His presence not only serves as a security measure but also brings comfort during this exciting time. As I am expecting our first child, the prospect of becoming grandparents has brought a new level of joy and support from Eric, enhancing the warmth and resolve in our household. While material things may offer momentary pleasure, it's truly the company of loved ones that enriches our lives. As we settle into our current living situation, surrounded by family, we are dedicated to maintaining the tranquility and joy in our daily lives, cherishing the serene and supportive environment we've cultivated. My name is Amy, and I'm 31 years old. I've been married to my husband, Sean, for 3 years, but we still don't have any children. We had envisioned owning a home and starting a family by now, but that dream seems to be slipping away. I've started to believe that Sean and his parents are contributing to our current situation. Despite our efforts to save money together, our savings haven't grown much. Sean often buys expensive branded gifts for his parents, and this habit has been a strain on our finances. Before we married, I knew Sean had a tradition of giving gifts to his parents, which I initially saw as a sign of respect. However, my perspective has shifted since we've been married. While his filial piety is admirable, his tendency to spend money recklessly has become more apparent. He seems to view our increased income as a green light for more extravagant spending. Where he used to stick to a budget, he now chooses only luxury items, and his parents have come to expect these costly gifts. They even request them for no particular reason, which I find difficult to understand. Sean has been secretly giving gifts to his parents, and discovering this has only fueled my growing resentment. While he shows unwavering dedication to his parents, he remains indifferent to mine. When I bring up my mother's upcoming birthday, his nonchalant response only adds to my frustration. The stark contrast between the gifts he lavishes on his parents and the modest ones I can afford for mine bothers me deeply. I sometimes wish I could give my parents expensive gifts, but our finances are stretched thin due to his spending. As a result, the gifts I manage to give them are always a compromise, falling short of what I'd like to offer. Although my parents appreciate what they receive, it pains me that I can't fully celebrate their special occasions. My dissatisfaction with Sean's one-sided concern for his parents is becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. After a year of marriage, as I watched our savings stagnate, I began addressing Sean's spending habits. However, each time we discussed it, the conversation ended in his anger. He would accuse me of lacking sympathy for his parents or even of disliking them without truly hearing my concerns. Despite my repeated attempts to communicate, he never genuinely listened or showed any willingness to change. A few months ago, Sean bought his mother an expensive new wallet. When I confronted him about it, he defended the purchase by claiming her old wallet was worn out. But I knew the old wallet was one he had given her just a year earlier, and it didn't look worn to me. Realizing that my words weren't getting through to him, I decided to approach his parents directly. Considering our future, I felt it was crucial to address the issue directly with Seen's parents. With Seen present, I began by showing them the balance of our joint account. I pointed out how little our savings had grown since we got married, despite both of us working. As you can see, I said, we've hardly increased our savings since we began, even though we both contribute to the household income. My in-laws examined the bank statement with unreadable expressions while Seen appeared visibly displeased. Undeterred, I turned to him and asked Seen, "Do you remember the promise we made when we got married? We agreed to save money to build the house and start a family, right?" He seemed to have a moment of realization and nodded, looking guilty. To get to the bottom of the issue, I pressed Seen further. "Then why aren't you cooperating? Are you saying you don't want to build a house or have children?" He shook his head vigorously, clearly disagreeing with that notion. Just as I was about to continue, my mother-in-law interrupted. "Oh, so we're talking about building a house now. That sounds wonderful. I'd like our room to be in a sunny spot." My father-in-law quickly added, "Yes, we definitely need more space for our things. 2 rooms would be ideal." I was taken aback by this unexpected response. Seizing the moment, Seen became enthusiastic about the idea. "All right, then let's make it 2 rooms, one for visits and another for storing clothes and belongings." Annoyed by their enthusiasm, I cut in, "If we're adding 2 more rooms, that will increase our costs significantly. Therefore, we'll need to avoid any expensive gifts until the loan is paid off." My mother-in-law quickly backpedaled. "Oh, it was just a joke. We rarely stay over at Seen's place anyway, right?" My father-in-law chimed in, "Exactly." Maintaining the smile, I firmly reiterated a decision I had made previously. "I see it was a joke. However, for the sake of our future household and children, we'll need to limit gifts to birthdays and anniversaries only." Seen immediately protested, "That's not fair to Mom and Dad." I had anticipated his reaction and responded with a look of disdain. "Then your pocket money will be entirely cut off. We can't find any other way to tighten our budget. Or are you planning to use the money you saved when you were single to cover your parents' gifts? If that's the case, I won't interfere." Seen fell silent, his face sour. I let out a soft sigh, and with a bright smile directed at my in-laws who were searching for a response, said, "I appreciate your understanding, as saving requires the effort of the entire family." They responded with reluctant nods, their faces still grim. It was clear that none of them, including Seen, were fully convinced, but I firmly closed the conversation, leaving no room for further discussion. After that discussion, Seen stopped giving extravagant gifts to his parents, and I noticed our joint bank account balance steadily increasing. I felt a sense of relief as our finances began to improve. However, this tranquility was short-lived. The turning point came when my sister gave birth. Being only a year younger, my sister and I have always been very close. Although our contact lessened after marriage, we still made an effort to keep in touch at least once a week. When she had the baby, she sent me a photo along with news of her joy and excitement. Perhaps I am biased because it's my niece, but the baby was truly adorable. I couldn't contain my excitement and immediately showed Seen the photo of the baby. His eyes softened as he was charmed by the baby's cuteness. I felt a wave of relief at his reaction. Although he had always said he liked children, I had my doubts about whether he truly meant it. I worried that his reluctance to save money was due to a lack of interest in having children. But from his reaction, it seemed he would cherish our future children as well. Feeling reassured, I remembered something and said to Seen, who was still admiring the photo, "I've already sent my sister a gift and some money for the baby." His expression immediately darkened and he glared at me with clear dissatisfaction. "You restrict gifts to my parents but spend so much on your sister," he said, clearly upset. As I stood there in shock, he continued to complain, "And you sent it without discussing it with me." His self-righteousness made me lose my temper, and I responded sharply, "How can you say that when you always secretly give gifts to your parents? This is for a baby celebration, not for no reason at all. If you can't accept that, then let's agree to stop giving gifts entirely." I worried that I had overstepped, but the words were out, and I couldn't backtrack. Perhaps the idea of being forbidden from giving gifts was too much for him to accept, but he didn't argue further and fell silent. His face remained displeased, but I took it as a sign that he had reluctantly agreed. A few days after our argument, I received a call from my mother-in-law. As soon as I answered, she started with, "I heard your sister had a baby." Realizing my husband had shared this news, I confirmed, "Yes, that's right. I expected her to offer congratulations or chat about the baby, but instead, she asked, "So, I heard you gave her a present. Is that true?" Taken aback by her directness, I replied, "Yes, I sent something for the baby." To my surprise, she responded cheerfully, "Well, I hope you'll have something for our anniversary next week too. I'm looking forward to it." Her request felt a bit impolite, but it was better than having Sean make an expensive purchase on his own. I agreed and ended the call. For my in-laws' anniversary, I decided to send a practical pair of glasses. I braced myself for a complaint, but none came, and time went by without incident. I had been too quick to judge my in-laws, but recent events made me realize my mistake. One day, my mother-in-law visited our home with a brand new luxury bag, beaming with delight. She admired the bag and thanked me, saying, "Thank you for the $4,000 bag." I was stunned, believing that our anniversary gift was merely a pair of glasses. I complained to Sean, "I feel awful about this." My shock left me barely able to whisper, but I chose not to address it with her at the time. She seemed oblivious to my reaction and cheerfully mentioned she was heading out to lunch with friends. After she left, I rushed to the bank. We had 3 accounts, individual accounts from before our marriage and a joint account we opened after tying the knot. The joint account showed no significant withdrawals, but checking our personal accounts revealed that $800 had been withdrawn from Sean's account and $4,000 from mine. When my husband came home, I confronted him about the missing money, but he dismissed my concerns. I thought it would be unfilial to give just glasses for the anniversary, so I used my account to cover Dad and yours to cover Mom, he explained. Seeing my anger, he grew flustered and insisted it wasn't a big deal since he hadn't touched the joint account. As I remained silent, his frustration mounted. "Why would you only get glasses for the anniversary? I went out of my way to make sure both of them were covered," he argued. Realizing the conversation was going nowhere, I grabbed the carry bag I had packed earlier and quickly left the house. I could hear him shouting behind me, but I ignored it and walked away. When I arrived at my parents' house, they greeted me at the door, clearly surprised by my sudden return. My intention to divorce left them even more shocked, as I hadn't mentioned anything about it before. It must have come as a surprise. I explained the deep differences in values and thinking between my husband, his parents, and myself, detailing the recent incident with the luxury bag. I shared how my fear of my assets being misused led me to decide on divorce. My parents listened, understood, and supported my decision. Since I had already prepared for the divorce, filing the petition and arranging for a lawyer was straightforward. Once I confirmed that the affidavit had likely reached him, my husband began trying to contact me repeatedly. His voicemails filled up with messages, which I initially listened to. However, as his messages grew increasingly angry, I stopped listening and chose not to respond. The divorce proceedings with my husband went much smoother than I had anticipated, thanks to my thorough preparations. Since we worked in different departments of the same company, news of our divorce spread quickly. Although he attempted to claim that I left of my own accord, his lies were quickly disproven. I had already informed my boss and colleagues about my intention to divorce, along with the reasons and the issues with my husband and his family. Despite any false information he might have spread, my boss and colleagues, who knew the real story, promptly refuted it. My husband only made things worse for himself by propagating falsehoods. He faced cold stares from colleagues and was pressured by his boss to resolve the matter quickly. Given his naturally timid nature, it seemed he couldn't handle the pressure. Under increasing pressure, he agreed to the divorce. Unable to handle the hostile environment at work, he resigned and moved back in with his parents. However, things didn't improve there. Rumors about him and his parents had spread beyond the office, reaching our relatives as well, thanks to a family member who worked at the company. The reception was icy. Returning to his parents' home only further damaged his reputation. The neighborhood viewed him as someone who had been abandoned by his wife, and his parents, known for flaunting their luxury and looking down on others, only worsened the situation. Although the exact source of the leaks was unclear, the rumors circulated quickly. Facing disapproval and cold stares from those around them, my ex-husband and his parents lost their former arrogance and became notably subdued. Their once beloved collection of luxury goods came to an end when my ex-husband lost his income, forcing them to sell off their possessions. A relative who used to work with us informed me that the relationship between my ex-husband and his parents had become frosty, filled with mutual blame. I felt indifferent to this news. They had become irrelevant to me after our separation. I've been living stress-free and enjoying each day. The steady increase in my bank account, now that I'm no longer burdened with saving, brings me great joy. My enthusiasm for work has returned. Previously, my earnings were drained by gifts for my in-laws, which was disheartening. But that's no longer an issue. I've also been able to give my parents the gifts I truly wanted to, something I couldn't afford before. They initially said that what they had received was enough, but once I explained it was for my personal satisfaction, they happily accepted. Seeing their reaction lifted the guilt I had felt. As for love, I plan to take a break, but if the opportunity for remarriage arises, I hope to apply the lessons I've learned from these experiences. Life has a peculiar way of throwing curveballs when you least expect it. That's how I met Marco. My name is Cora, and at 28, I was working as a fitness trainer at a local gym, living a life as structured and disciplined as my workout routines. Then one day, Marco walked in, looking for a quick session, and ended up changing the entire course of my life. "Hey, I'm Marco," he said, flashing a smile that could light up the darkest corners. "Heard this is the best place to get in shape. Mind showing me the ropes?" I raised an eyebrow, sizing him up. He didn't exactly fit the mold of the usual gym goer, more like someone who spent his days charming his way through life. "Sure, Marco. Follow my lead and you'll be in shape in no time. But I warn you, I don't go easy on anyone." He chuckled, his eyes sparkling with mischief. "Wouldn't have it any other way. Lead on, Cora." Training Marco was like trying to tame a wild stallion. He had energy for days and a stubborn streak to match. But beneath the jokes and playful banter, there was a genuine connection neither of us could deny. As days turned into weeks, our gym sessions became the highlight of my life. It wasn't just about the workouts anymore. It was about the laughter, the stories, and the moments we shared. One evening, as we wrapped up, Marco turned to me, his usual grin replaced by a serious look. "Cora, I need to tell you something. I'm not just here for the workouts. I'm here for you. You have this fire, this strength I've never seen in anyone else, and I'm crazy about you." I was taken aback. This was Marco, the guy who joked about everything, now standing in front of me, bare and honest. "Marco, I don't know what to say. You're not what I expected, but I can't deny there's something between us. Something real." That was the start of our whirlwind romance, intense and passionate, like a storm that swept everything in its path. Before I knew it, I was saying "I do" to the man who had walked into my gym and turned my world upside down. But the fairy tale didn't last long. After the wedding, Marco dropped a bombshell that would set the stage for the battles to come. "Cora, we need to move into my mother's house. Family is everything to me, and I need to be there for them." My stomach dropped. Maria, his mother, was a force to be reckoned with, sharp-tongued and critical, a stark contrast to Marco's warmth. And then there was Sofia, his sister, a mirror image of her mother's arrogance and disdain. "Marco, are you sure about this? Our relationship with your mother and Sofia is strained, to put it mildly. Is this really the best idea?" I asked, trying to keep the worry out of my voice. He took my hands in his gaze earnest. "I know it's not ideal, but family means everything to me. We'll make it work, I promise. It's me and our little family against the world." Moving into Marco's family home felt like stepping onto a battlefield. Every day was a struggle under Maria's strict rules. "Don't forget the dishes need doing, and the living room needs a good dusting. We run a tight ship here," she would say, her voice dripping with anything but warmth. I would nod, biting back the retorts that threatened to spill. "Of course, Maria. I wouldn't want the house to be anything less than perfect." Sofia would smirk from her perch at the kitchen table, her eyes scanning me like I was some bug under a microscope. "Yeah, Cora, and try to keep up, will you? We don't need any dead weight around here." The days felt long, the work unending. It was like living in a loop, each day a repeat of the last. Cleaning, cooking, trying to find my footing in a house that felt like a minefield. Marco was there, but not really. His restaurant was his world, and I felt like a ghost in his family home. Then, life threw me another curveball. I was pregnant. The news should have been a beacon of joy, but in Maria's house, it was just another ripple in already troubled waters. "Pregnant, huh? Maria's voice was flat, her eyes hard. Well, don't expect any special treatment. This house doesn't run itself, you know. I placed my hand instinctively on my belly. I don't expect special treatment, Maria, but I do expect some understanding. I'm carrying a child, your grandchild. That shut her up, if only for a moment. But the chores piled up and the glares grew sharper, making the house feel smaller each day. Sophia was no help, watching my struggles with a satisfied smirk. You're slowing down, Cora, she would taunt. Can't handle a bit of housework. What kind of mother are you going to be? I wanted to scream, to lash out, but I held it in for Marco, for the tiny heartbeat grew stronger each day. The tension was a constant companion, an unwelcome guest at every meal and every moment. Marco, please talk to them, I pleaded one night, the weight of the day heavy on my shoulders. Your mother and Sophia treat me like I'm nothing, like I don't belong. He sighed, a tired sound that spoke volumes. Cora, they're just set in their ways. It's how they've always been. Just give it time, it'll get better. But it didn't get better, it got harder. The house became more suffocating, Maria and Sophia more relentless. I was just trying to keep my head above water and protect the tiny life that depended on me. Each night, as I lay in bed, the moon casting shadows across the room, I felt the weight of my reality pressing down, heavier than ever. I made a silent vow. I wouldn't let them break me. Their disdain and sharp words wouldn't define me. I was stronger than they realized, and one day they'd see. This house, this battlefield, would be mine to conquer. Becoming a mother was supposed to be the most beautiful chapter of my life. But in Maria's house, it felt more like a trial by fire. Luca was my little bundle of joy, my ray of sunshine amid the storm. Yet every coo and every cry was met with relentless pressure and criticism from Maria and Sophia. Really, Cora, can't you keep that child quiet? Maria snapped, her tone sharp as knives, every time Luca whimpered. I held him closer, whispering words of comfort, trying to shield him from his grandmother's harshness. He's just a baby, Maria. Babies cry, that's how they communicate. Sophia rolled her eyes, her voice dripping with disdain. Oh please, you're just not doing it right, Cora. Maybe if you paid more attention to him instead of feeling sorry for yourself, he'd be quieter. Their words stung, each one a reminder of how out of place I felt in this house and this family. It wasn't just the verbal jabs, it was the scrutinizing looks, especially after my body had changed during pregnancy. The weight I'd gained became a favorite topic of ridicule. Looks like those fitness trainer days are long gone, huh, Cora? Maria would chuckle, her smirk infuriating. Better lay off the sweets if you want to fit into your old clothes again. I clenched my fists, forcing a smile to hide my hurt. I'm proud of my body, Maria. It brought Luca into this world. The weight is temporary, but the love I have for my son is forever. But my defiance fell on deaf ears. I was the outsider, the intruder in their perfect little world. And no matter how hard I tried, it never seemed to be enough. Enough was enough. The constant belittling from Maria and Sophia wasn't just chipping away at my spirit, it was igniting a fire within me, a fire to reclaim my life, my body, and my self-respect. I decided to take control right there in the suffocating walls of that house. I started small, turning the corner of my room into a personal gym. It wasn't much, just a mat, some weights, and a determination as strong as steel. This is it, Luca, I whispered, cradling him in one arm while setting up my phone to record. Mommy's turning it all around, starting now. The first few days were tough. The exercises left me breathless, my muscles screaming in protest. But each drop of sweat and every aching limb felt like a triumph. You think you can just bounce back, Cora? Maria sneered one day, watching me pant through my routine. It's not that easy, you know. Takes more than a few stretches to fix what's broken. I wiped my brow, fixing her with a steely gaze. Watch me, Maria. I'm not just fixing what's broken. I'm building something stronger. I don't need your approval or your snide comments. That's when I decided to go public with my journey. I started a YouTube channel and an Instagram page, sharing every struggle and every victory. It was raw and real, and to my surprise, it resonated with so many out there. Look at this, Luca, I'd say, showing him the screen filled with comments and likes. We're not alone. There are so many rooting for us. Then came the offers from advertisers, turning my little corner of the internet into a thriving source of income. I was stunned and overwhelmed. But above all, I felt empowered. Can you believe this, Luca? I whispered, tucking him into bed. We're doing it. We're really doing it. But with every success, the tension in the house grew thicker. Maria and Sofia couldn't stand it, the way I turned their ridicule into armor, their disdain into a driving force. "What's this now, Cora? Playing the star while the rest of us do the real work?" Sofia spat one day, her eyes filled with venom. I stood my ground, Luca on my hip, my heart stronger than ever. "It's called turning the tide, Sofia. It's called taking back control. And if that bothers you, well, that's your problem, not mine." What once felt like a prison was now just a backdrop. My world was larger, brighter, filled with the love of my son and the support of a community that saw me for who I truly was. The success of my online channels was a sweet victory, but it brought a new kind of challenge. Marco was stunned by the numbers, the comments, the sheer scale of it all. But his pride was bruised. He didn't want the world, especially his family, to see the shift in our roles. "Cora, this is incredible," he said one evening, his eyes pleading. "But you know how my mother and Sofia are. Please, let's keep this between us. I don't want them thinking I'm not the provider." I sighed, the weight of his request heavy on my shoulders. "Marco, I'm proud of what I've achieved. It's not just about the money. It's about respect, about independence." He nodded, reaching for my hand. "I know, and I respect that. But in this house, it's complicated. Let's just keep it our little secret for now." Reluctantly, I agreed and began transferring $4,000 a month to Marco's account. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on me. Maria and Sofia continued their tirade, oblivious to the truth. They saw me as a leech, living off their precious son and brother. "You're just a freeloader, Cora, always taking and never contributing," Maria snarled, her words as sharp as ever. I held back my retort, using my silent shield against her barbs. "I contribute in my own way, Maria, not that you'd ever acknowledge it." Sofia was no better. "What do you even do all day, Cora? Lounge around while we do all the real work." Their ignorance was a bitter pill to swallow, but I swallowed it anyway. My focus was on Luca, my channels, my newfound strength. I'd walk with my son in the park, my camera constant companion, capturing moments, workouts, and the real me that they refused to see. "Cora, you're wasting your time with those videos," Maria scoffed, watching me edit my latest post. But the numbers told a different story. The subscribers, the views, the comments. They were real, tangible, and they were mine. Maybe to you, Maria, but to me and to thousands out there, it's anything but a waste, I replied, my confidence unwavering. Marco's restaurant troubles added another layer to our already complicated life. One day, he approached me, his pride barely holding back his desperation. "Cora, the restaurant is struggling. I need help. Could you? Would you lend me some money just to tide things over?" His vulnerability was a rare sight, tugging at my heartstrings. "Of course, Marco, I'll help. But this isn't just a loan. It's an investment in us, in our family." His relief was palpable, but it was tinged with the unspoken truth. I was the lifeline, the silent savior of the family facade. As I transferred $10,000, I watched the gratitude and guilt flicker in his eyes. I sensed the balance had shifted. Time in that house felt like a ticking bomb, with each day bringing us closer to an explosion. Sofia's marriage introduced her husband, Rick, into our already cramped space, and his presence only heightened the chaos and tension that had become a constant in our lives. "You two just take up space," Maria sneered, her words slicing through the crowded living room. "You're nothing but freeloaders, Cora, you and that kid." I clenched my teeth, hugging Luca closer. "We're family, Maria, or at least that's what a house like this is supposed to mean." But when Sofia announced her pregnancy, Maria's attitude shifted to something even harsher and more direct. "This house is getting crowded, Cora, and frankly, you and your boy are just in the way." The words stung, but before I could muster a response, Marco dropped a bombshell of his own at dinner. "I have to go out of town for a few weeks. Restaurant business," he said, avoiding my gaze. A few weeks in this madhouse without the slightest buffer Marco provided felt like a sentence I couldn't bear. "You're leaving now? With everything going on?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper over the lump in my throat. He didn't meet my eyes. "I have to, Cora. It's important." And just like that, he was gone. The door shut behind him, and the weight of his absence settled over the house like a thick fog. I tried to maintain a semblance of normalcy for Luca. We went for walks, did our workouts in the park, anything to escape the suffocating atmosphere of the house. But when we returned from kindergarten one day, the sight that greeted us froze me in my tracks. Our belongings, bags, suitcases, Luca's toys, were piled outside the front door like trash. "Mommy, what's happening?" Luca's small voice trembled with confusion and fear. I swallowed hard, fighting back tears as I approached the door. "Maria, Sofia, what is this? Why are things outside?" I demanded, my voice shaking with anger and disbelief. The response came cold and merciless from the other side of the door. "You heard me, Cora. The house is too crowded, and you two are just taking up space. It's time for you to leave and find somewhere else to call home." Maria's voice was like a knife, and Sofia's echoing laughter twisted it deeper. I stood there, my whole world collapsing around me. What should I tell Marco? What would I say to my son when he asked where his father, his home, had gone? Their laughter was the only answer, a cruel reminder that we were expendable. An inconvenience easily discarded. With a heavy heart and a mind swirling with shock and betrayal, I gathered our belongings. Holding Luca's hand tightly, I stepped away from the house that was never a home. The pain was sharp, the betrayal bitter, but it was the clarity of the moment that struck me most. This was the end of one chapter, a chapter of struggle and pain, but it was also the beginning of something new, something ours. I rented an apartment, a small but safe haven for Luca and me. As I unpacked our lives, the reality of what had happened and what I had escaped began to sink in. I was alone, but for the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of hope, a sense of freedom. Settling into the new apartment was a bittersweet experience. It was a sanctuary where the shadows of Maria's house couldn't reach us. I meticulously arranged our belongings, trying to make the space feel like home when my phone buzzed with a message that sent shockwaves through my world. It was from Sofia, her message laced with sickening glee. "You think you know Marco? Think again, Cora." Attached was a link, a portal to a truth I had never imagined. Trembling, I clicked it, my heart racing. I clicked the link, and my world fractured as the screen lit up with images that shattered my reality. There was Marco, not mired in restaurant troubles but tangled in the arms of another woman. Their intimacy was unmistakable, the photos standing in stark contrast to the lies he had spun for me. The most recent shots were dated just yesterday. The business trip, the stress, everything had been a cruel facade, and I was the unwitting financier of his double life. A numbing cold washed over me, the pain and betrayal intertwining into a fierce resolve. For years I had been the backbone, the silent supporter of a man who lived in shadows while his family treated me like dirt. A week of emotional turmoil was punctuated by incessant calls from Marco, whose voice had once been a source of comfort but was now a trigger for my contempt. "Cora, please, you need to come back. Mom and Sofia crossed the line, and the restaurant is in shambles. I need you. The bills are piling up." His pleas, once capable of tugging at my heartstrings, now ignited nothing but disdain. "So you only need me to pay your bills and your family's bills?" His voice cracked, desperation seeping through. "We're still a family, you, me, Luca. Isn't that worth fighting for?" A bitter laugh escaped me. "A family? Is that what you call this charade?" "No, Marco, we're far from a family. And as for your restaurant, your debts are yours to deal with." Silence fell heavily between us, almost tangible. I could feel the weight of his predicament pressing down on him. "But Cora, the money?" "Your problem, Marco. Your restaurant, your money. I'm done being your lifeline." I cut in, my voice unwavering. "However, we will discuss this tomorrow. I will come to your mother's house." I made my decision. I returned to that house, not as the broken woman they expected, but as the force they never saw coming. Armed with the truth and a plan that would turn their world upside down, I stepped into the lion's den. Marco's face lit up with a mix of hope and surprise, but Maria and Sofia's expressions were cold and calculating. They clearly weren't thrilled about my return. "Look who's back," Maria said, her tone dripping with disdain. "Missed us, have you?" I met her gaze without flinching. "Not at all, Maria. I'm here for something important." I handed Marco an envelope. His face drained of color as he recognized it for what it was: divorce papers. "Marco," I stated, relishing the taste of freedom, "our marriage ends here." Maria and Sofia's initial shock quickly morphed into smiles. "Finally getting rid of the dead weight, and Marco?" Sofia jeered, her laughter grating on my nerves. But their joy was premature. "Don't get too excited," I interjected sharply. "You might want to sit down for this. It's been me, not Marco, keeping this household afloat." The room fell silent, stunned. Marco's eyes darted between me and his family as the truth hung in the air. "It's true," he admitted, his voice barely audible. "The restaurant's been failing. Cora's been covering everything. She transferred $4,000 to me every month." Maria and Sofia turned on him, their faces twisted with anger and disbelief. "You lied to us. You let her pay our bills." Maria's voice was shrill. "What should we do now without her money?" "I'm going to file for alimony," Marco said, desperation clear in his tone. "I earn less, so it's only fair." His mother and sister delighted in this revelation, clapping their hands as if they were celebrating a victory. Their hollow applause echoed in the room, but I couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity. "You think that's going to work, Marco? You won't get a cent from me, especially not after I found out about your affair." The color drained from his face. "How did you?" he stammered, his bravado crumbling. I pointedly looked at Sofia. "Your sister was kind enough to send me all the proof I needed." What erupted next was chaos, accusations flying as betrayals were laid bare. Marco and Sofia shouted at each other, arms flailing amid the frenzy. But I remained calm, my next move crystal clear. "I'm taking back what's mine," I declared, my voice cutting through the noise. "Every appliance, every piece of furniture I paid for. You're left with what you've earned, which is nothing." And that's exactly what I did. I stripped the house of every trace of my financial support, leaving them to face the consequences of their actions. Their pleas for mercy and forgiveness fell on deaf ears as I blocked their numbers, severing the last ties to a life of deceit and disrespect. The fallout was swift. Marco's restaurant crumbled under the weight of debt. The house was lost, and Sofia's husband walked away from the wreckage of their family. They were left with nothing but each other and the mistakes they had made, crammed into a rented apartment. As for Luca and me, we flourished in our new life. Our days were filled with love, laughter, and the peace we had fought so hard to find. The past was behind us, a distant memory overshadowed by the bright future we were building together. We were more than survivors. We were conquerors, and our story was just beginning.
Hey there, I'm Sheila, and I guess you could say I'm living the suburban dream. I've been married to my amazing husband, Chris, for 4 years now, and it's been quite an adventure. We met in college, both studying business, and there was just something about his smile and easygoing personality that drew me in. From the beginning, we were inseparable, staying up late to study, laughing at inside jokes, and planning our future together. Fast forward a few years and we got married, promising to stick by each other through thick and thin. The whole for better or worse thing seemed easy at the time, but little did I know our journey was about to take a challenging turn, thanks to my mother-in-law. Chris and his mom, Martha, have always been super close, which sometimes felt a bit much to me. Martha raised him almost entirely on her own after her divorce, and it seemed like she was determined to keep him under her wing, even after he moved out. I heard stories about how she used to match outfits with him and always stayed close while he played with his friends. Martha had this habit of planning Chris' life down to the minute, almost like she was the one in charge. Even when he went off to college, her clinginess didn't stop. She'd call him several times a day to check on his schedule and even visited him twice a week. This really affected Chris. He's a great guy, but you could tell he felt the pressure of meeting her expectations. When Chris introduced me to Martha for the first time at dinner, I could feel her sizing me up, analyzing every detail. "Sheila, it's so lovely to finally meet you. Chris talks about you all the time," she said. "Thank you, Martha, it's great to meet you too," I replied. "Oh, I'm sure it is. Chris has a way of surprising us with his choices," she added, with a hint of something I couldn't quite place. Then she asked what I do for a living, and when I told her I work in marketing, she wasn't all that interested. Instead, she started talking about Chris' ex-girlfriends, like Lily, an artsy girl who was always lost in her own world, and another girl who was a musical talent, but too free-spirited for Martha's taste. "Mom, you're embarrassing me," Chris said, trying to change the subject. "No matter who comes into Chris' life, I'll always be the first woman he loves," Martha said with a smile. From the start, it felt like everything I said or did was being compared to what Martha thought was best. If I mentioned a movie I liked, she'd say Chris didn't enjoy that genre. If I talked about a place I wanted to visit, she'd point out that Chris had already been there with her. It felt like she was trying to prove she knew Chris better than anyone, and I was just trying to keep up. Things got even crazier when Martha's kitchen caught fire, turning her house into a mess. She needed a place to stay while it was being fixed, so of course she moved in with us. And the day she arrived, she handed me a 14-page rulebook. Yes, you heard that right, a rulebook. I'm really sorry about the fire at your place. That must have been tough. You're welcome to stay here as long as you need. Let me grab those bags for you. Martha. Thanks, Sheila. The fire was a nightmare and really shook things up. But before we all get settled, there's something I want to give you. Sheila. Oh, all right. What is it? Martha. It's my little creation. A guide to keeping peace around the house. Sheila. A guide? Okay, that's interesting. Martha. You got it. It's just my way of keeping things on track while I'm staying here. Sheila. What's with all these rules? We don't need a rule book to function as adults, do we? Martha. Oh, Sheila, I get it. But having a few ground rules can prevent unnecessary drama, you know? And breaking them might have some consequences. Sheila. Consequences? Are we running a boot camp here? Martha. Stop complaining. Now let's tackle those bags, and I'm curious to see where you've set me up. After I showed Martha her room and returned to mine, I couldn't resist flipping through her rulebook. Each page was filled with bizarre instructions like vacuuming the living room precisely at 8:30 a.m., serving dinner at 6:45 p.m., and my personal favorite, washing the bathroom tiles with lemon-scented cleaner every other day. I was shocked. What kind of controlling behavior was this? When Chris got back from work, I showed him the rulebook. Before bed, we both started laughing at how ridiculous it was. It felt like we'd stepped into another world where everything was super organized. Chris. Okay, this one takes the cake. Arrange the spice jars in alphabetical order. I guess our spices are getting a degree in linguistics. Sheila. And don't forget Gourmet Tuesdays, where I apparently have to whip up a 5-course meal from scratch. That's one way to turn our kitchen into a Michelin-star restaurant. Chris. You know, honey, my mom means well, but she needs to realize that I'm grown up now. This is our house, not hers. We have our own way of doing things. Sheila. You're right. So promise me you won't take this rulebook too seriously. It's just her way of showing she cares, even if it's a bit eccentric. Chris. Deal. No alphabetized spices or gourmet extravaganzas in our future, I promise. The next morning, I woke up to find Chris already dressed and ready for work. He kissed me goodbye, and I noticed Martha's rulebook still sitting on my bedside table. It was around 8:00 a.m., and according to the book, I was supposed to vacuum the living room by 8:30 a.m. Yeah, right. I took a shower, got dressed, grabbed a granola bar, and left for work before Martha could catch me. When I walked in after a tough day at the office, hoping to relax on the couch, I was met with chaos. Chris and Martha were in the middle of a heated argument in the living room. Martha was clearly upset. Martha. Chris, I'm really struggling to understand why Sheila can't seem to respect the rules I've set in this house. Did you notice she just left for work this morning without doing any of the chores? Chris. Mom, we've talked about this. The house is turning into chaos, and it's all about maintaining order, right? But I've grown out of those rules. Martha, rules are how I raised you, and they're still important. You think you know him better, Sheila? Because I distinctly remember him asking for pancakes every Sunday morning when he was a kid. Sheila. Martha, seriously? Who do you think you are? This is our house. Martha. This is my son's house, and it belongs to me as much as it belongs to you. Sheila. Excuse me, Chris? Chris. Mom. I need to come clean. This is Sheila's house. She owns it. Martha. What? How is that possible? Sheila. Martha. When Chris and I got married, my parents gifted me this house as a first anniversary present. It's under my name. Martha. Chris, you never told me that. Chris. I didn't want to complicate things, Mom. I let you believe the house was mine, and I'm really sorry, Mom. After Chris stormed off dramatically, I was left standing there, completely dumbfounded by what he just revealed. My mind was racing, trying to understand why he'd lie about something as big as our house. Chris had never lied to me before. He'd always been the sweetest, most genuine guy. I took a deep breath and headed to our bedroom, gently pushing the door open. There he was, Chris, looking like he was drowning in guilt. Sheila, hey, can we talk? Chris, yeah, I guess we should. Look, I'm not mad or anything. I just can't wrap my head around why you'd lie about the house, of all things. We've always been open and honest with each other. Chris, I know, honey. That's what's been eating me up. I should have just told you the truth from the start. Sheila. Okay, so what's the deal? Chris. It's my mom. She's always been on my case. Ever since I was a kid, she's had these expectations about who I should be and what I should achieve. It's like she wanted this perfect version of me. Sheila. And you thought lying about the house would... what? Impress her? Chris. No, not impress. More like avoid disappointing her. She's always been proud of being in control of things. I thought if she found out that you're the one who actually owns the house, it would shake things up. She'd be disappointed in me for not being the son she wants me to be. Sheila. Chris, you're your own person. You've always been kind, hardworking, and true to yourself. You're the man I fell in love with. Why does she get to define your worth? Hearing Chris's backstory with his toxic mother really hit me hard. Growing up with that kind of negativity had made him feel like he had to lie to his own mom. The whole situation was so unfair. Chris, the most laid-back and caring guy I knew, was carrying around this heavy baggage from his messed-up family. He deserved better. A childhood that didn't leave him feeling like he had to lie or prove himself. What really got to me was how toxic Martha could be. It made sense why she had no friends and had nowhere to go when her kitchen burned down. I was angry that she had this hold over Chris, making him feel like he had to lie to keep the peace. Her toxic presence was poisoning everything in our lives. The next day was seriously weird. I was getting ready for work, fully prepared for Martha to come at me with her usual chore checklist or some sarcastic comment. But to my surprise, she was completely silent. I left for work feeling a mix of relief and suspicion, wondering if this was the calm before the storm. When I came home after a long day, hoping to relax, I walked into a complete mess. The furniture was moved around, and the vases and plant pots from my beloved indoor garden were nowhere to be seen. Sheila, Martha, what have you done? Martha. Oh, Sheila, I just thought the room needed a bit of a change. Sheila, change? Martha, this is our home. You can't just come in and rearrange everything without even asking. Martha. Well, I thought it would be better this way, and those plants were taking up too much space. Sheila. You know what, Martha? I'm just tired. Tired of your constant need to control everything. I invited you into my home, gave you a space here, and what do? You find new ways to make my life miserable. Martha. Oh please, Sheila, spare me the drama. You're overreacting. They were just plants. When I stepped into my bedroom, I was shocked. My bed was against a new wall. The photo frames on the dresser were cramped, and my desk was in a spot that made no sense. I couldn't believe Martha thought she had the right to rearrange everything. I stormed into Martha's room, my frustration reaching a boiling point. Enough was enough. Sheila, Martha, seriously, what were you thinking? You had no right to go into my bedroom and rearrange things without asking. Martha, you're blowing this way out of proportion. Sheila. Martha, we need to talk. I've been trying to stay calm, but I can't hold back anymore. You've been treating me like some sort of intruder in my own home, and it's not okay. I get that you have your rules and your idea of how things should be, but being a mom doesn't give you a free pass to mess with our lives. Martha. Whoa, where's all this coming from? Sheila. It's been building up for months. Your critiques, your eye rolls, you act like you're the guru of life, especially when it comes to Chris. But guess what? Your way isn't the only way. Believe it or not, I've been guiding him too since his dad left, and I give you props for that. But that doesn't mean you're the boss of our lives. I've seen how your need for control is stressing Chris out. He's walking around like he's carrying a ton of bricks on his shoulders, worried that he's not living up to your expectations. I'm starting to see things clearly now. I notice when Chris hesitates to speak his mind around you, and I hear it when he tries to keep you happy no matter what. Chris is a grown man, and I'm not letting you control him anymore. You've just brought trouble on yourself, Sheila, by questioning me as a parent. You'll see soon. After that showdown with Martha, I was emotionally drained and completely exhausted. I told Chris everything that happened later that night, and I found comfort in his arms. He was like my shield against the emotional storm. He apologized to me and told me that his mom wasn't going to stay with us permanently and that she would be gone soon. Chris' "she'll be gone soon" comment started to make sense, so I didn't let it bother me much. But the next morning, while I was getting ready for work, Martha came up to me out of nowhere and apologized. She said she tried to relax and not interfere. Surprisingly, she stuck to it. Things were going pretty smoothly for a while. Martha seemed determined to be helpful, pitching in with chores and being all nice and cooperative. She even made dinner for Chris and me, and we actually sat down like a normal family to eat. It felt weird, but honestly, it was kind of nice. For a moment, Chris and I started thinking maybe she was turning a corner. But then, in about a week, everything took an unexpected turn. I came home one day after work, and Martha greeted me, asked how my day was, and handed me some homemade protein bars. It seemed like a nice gesture, so I took one and had a bite. I ended up eating the whole thing, but soon after I felt a weird lump in my throat, and my skin broke out in rashes. Panic set in. Did Martha put peanuts in these? I called out for her. "You know I'm allergic to peanuts. What did you put in those bars, Martha?" "Oh my gosh, Sheila, I forgot about your allergy. I didn't mean to, I swear. Seriously, Martha. I could die." I rushed to my room to get my EpiPen, and Martha followed me. "Where did I put that EpiPen?" "I need it now." "Looking for something, Sheila?" "My EpiPen. You rearranged this room. Where did you put it?" "This isn't a game, Martha. My EpiPen is a matter of life and death." "Well, we'll just have to find it, won't we?" I could feel my body shutting down, like I was running on empty. My vision got blurry, and a sense of doom settled in. I knew things were seriously messed up. As I was trying not to black out, I heard Chris's voice cutting through the haze. He was on the phone, talking like his life depended on it. An ambulance arrived and the paramedics quickly got to work stabilizing me. The ride to the hospital was a blur, with sirens and beeping sounds all around. It felt like I was drifting in and out of a strange dream until I finally closed my eyes. When I woke up in the hospital, Chris was there, looking worn out but relieved. I was done with Martha's manipulation, her toxicity, and her complete disregard for anyone's well-being except her own. As soon as I was discharged, I had a serious heart-to-heart with Chris. He knew it was time to take a stand too. He had seen firsthand the damage his mother's actions could cause, and he was ready to set things right. A couple of days after I was discharged from the hospital, Chris and I went home. "Mom, we need to talk." "I don't know what Sheila told you, but it was all a mistake. Cut it out. You know what, Mom? I used to think I had a mother, someone who cared, someone who wanted the best for her family. But I was dead wrong. I didn't realize I had a monster for a mom, someone who's willing to manipulate just to satisfy her own twisted need for control." "Chris, no honey. I need to get this out, Mom. You've torn this family apart with your toxic behavior. You've taken every opportunity to belittle and demean Sheila, someone who's done nothing but support and care for all of us. And what did she get in return? Neglect and her allergies triggered because you forgot? It's sickening. You nearly killed Sheila. Let that sink in. You almost killed your son's wife. Didn't you even think about me once? Chris, please, I never meant for things to go this far. I know I've made mistakes, and I'm so sorry for what happened to Sheila." "Mom, listen carefully. You have two choices. You can leave on your own terms, or I'll make sure you're out of here. You can stay in a motel or wherever you want, but you're not staying here. This is where it ends, Mom. Our relationship, whatever was left of it, ends right here. I don't have a mother anymore, not in the way that matters." Honestly, I couldn't help but feel a twisted sense of satisfaction when Chris showed his mom the door. She loved him so much that it must have hurt like crazy to be rejected by her own son. But she deserved it after the protein bar situation. We've lost touch with Martha completely. No calls, no texts, no sign of where she went. It's like she vanished into thin air. And as much as I hoped she would grow and find her way, I can't help but wonder where she ended up. Despite all the drama, she's still Chris's mom, and that worry for her is still there. Chris ran into a couple of construction guys working on her house, and they told him she drops by sometimes to check on things, so I guess she's okay. Our home is no longer a battleground, and who knows if we'll ever get in touch with her again. For now, we're just trying to live in the moment.
Greetings, everyone. I'm Skyla, and it was my sister-in-law, Julia, who encouraged me to share my story. Julia and I share a strong bond, having worked together before I met my now husband Noah through her. I am truly grateful to Julia for introducing us, and Noah and I have built a wonderful life together. While Julia and Noah are fantastic people, Noah's mother Susan is a different story. Upon our introduction, Susan openly expressed her dislike for me, creating tension in our relationship. Despite Noah's efforts to change his mother's opinion, Susan remained hostile. Over time, I realized the extent of her problematic behavior, especially during our wedding, where she falsely accused me of ruining her dress. Noah and I frequently clashed over his mother, but Susan's presence persisted. Being a single mom, Susan held onto Noah tightly, making it difficult for him to cut ties. The turning point occurred on our first anniversary when Julia warned me about Susan's plan to humiliate me. Susan, determined to tarnish my image, intended to frame me for stealing her heirloom necklace. Despite my attempts to intervene, Susan remained steadfast in her malicious intentions. This revelation added another layer of stress to our already strained relationship, as I navigated the challenges of preserving my marriage while dealing with Susan's disruptive presence. As our first anniversary approached, I faced the dilemma of inviting Susan or protecting my peace of mind. Despite Noah's desire to include his mother, the looming threat of Susan's schemes cast a shadow over what should have been a joyous occasion with close friends and family. I had hoped for a joyful celebration with everyone, but Susan's presence cast a shadow over the occasion. Despite learning about her plans from Julia, I hesitated to inform Noah. I believed he needed to confront the reality of his mother's actions and sever ties with her. Vigilant, I kept a watchful eye on Susan, but never caught her in the act. As the day of the anniversary party arrived, Julia and I remained unable to intercept Susan. However, the situation took a turn when Susan approached me with a menacing threat. During the party, as I was refilling my drink, she cornered me and accused me of orchestrating a scheme to take Noah away from her. Confused by her baseless claims, I questioned her connection between my marriage anniversary and her perceived competition. Undeterred, Susan insisted that I was responsible for Noah distancing himself from her. Her ominous warning hinted at the impending drama she had planned. Julia stayed close, recognizing the potential for Susan's disruptive behavior. As the party continued, Susan excused herself to put on her jewelry, only to return in distress, claiming her necklace and earrings were missing. Julia and I exchanged knowing glances, realizing that Susan had orchestrated a scheme to frame me. Despite Susan's theatrical display of distress, we maintained our composure, silently observing her attempts to convince the guests that I had stolen her jewelry. As people questioned her about the missing items, Susan tearfully responded, but suddenly feigned realization and exclaimed, "Wait a minute now. I understand that my jewelry has been stolen. I have a strong suspicion about who might have taken it." "Mom, what are you talking about? I'm sure you have misplaced it, and it's lying somewhere here. We don't have many visitors, so how could it get stolen?" "Noah, you don't understand. No one broke into the house or came from outside to steal my precious jewelry. It is your greedy wife who took it." Susan's accusation left everyone gasping, as she pointed directly at me as the culprit. Noah appeared shocked and somewhat embarrassed by his mother's words. Yet, I knew he trusted me implicitly and wouldn't entertain the idea for a moment that I'd stolen from his mom. Despite his love for his mother, his trust in me remained steadfast. "No, Mom, I don't think this is fair. You're throwing false accusations at Skyla. She would never do something like this. You must have misplaced it. No, Noah, you have to believe me. Remember how Skyla gushed about my heirloom jewelry? She knew I would never let her have it, so she stole it from me. Mom, those are baseless accusations. Skyla was merely complimenting the design. She never once asked you to give her the necklace. Noah, my poor child, you are blinded by love. You have to see how vile and greedy your wife is. She is the one who stole my jewelry. That's why she never asked to borrow it from me. She wanted it for herself. At this point, Noah and Susan engaged in a heated argument, while the rest of the guests watched in disbelief. It was deeply embarrassing to be accused of theft on my own anniversary, something I never anticipated. However, I resolved to handle the situation with dignity. Susan, you have some nerve to make accusations about me in my own home. You think I'm a lowly thief who would go after your jewelry? You are dead wrong. I am above that. Don't try to act all innocent and angelic, Skyla. I know for a fact that you took my jewelry last night. I saw you going into my room and coming out with the bag. I didn't think anything of it since it's your house, but now it all makes sense. You were stealing my jewelry. Susan, you need to stop making baseless assumptions. You have no right to ruin my reputation without any evidence. Who knows what you did with your jewelry? Don't blame it on me. Okay then, if I'm lying, why don't we go and check your room? I am 100% positive that I will find my jewelry there. We have plenty of witnesses as well. Noah, you cannot just invade our privacy like that. It's rude and disrespectful. Leave it be. At this point, I don't care, Noah. Your mom has taken it too far. If we don't allow it, everyone here will always doubt that I am a thief. It's a big allegation, Noah. Noah looked torn between his loyalty to his mother and his trust in me. While he understood his mother's frustration, he also recognized the severity of her accusations without evidence. It was clear that I needed to do everything possible to clear my name. So Noah relented and told his mom to go check our room. As we all went, people started looking around, including Susan, the woman who had stirred up this unnecessary drama. She went straight to my closet, pulled out the jewelry box, and exclaimed, "Look, Noah, I found my jewelry. It was in your wife's closet." I was right. She freaking stole my stuff because she is greedy and jealous. No, this is impossible. I know my wife wouldn't steal jewelry from you. I don't know how it got there. You didn't take it, right, Skyla? Of course, I didn't, Noah. You know I'm not a thief. Oh, really, Skyla? Then how did my previous jewelry set end up in your closet? There is no way you can get out of this, Skyla. You should have confessed and given me my stuff back. I'm sorry, Noah, but I think I need to call the police. Noah stood there looking dumbfounded while Susan called the police. Whispers circulated around the room, and many couldn't believe what they were witnessing. It was peak humiliation for me, but I stayed composed, waiting for the police to arrive as Susan berated me, calling me names and saying awful things. She said, "Noah, this is it. I know you didn't believe me when I said that Skyla is a gold digger. I'm sure now you know that I was right. You need to get smart and divorce her. No one wants a thief in the family. She will get arrested by the cops now anyway." Mom, I don't think it was wise of you to call the cops. You may not like what happens next. What do you mean, Julia? I wasn't going to let Skyla get away with theft. People who commit crimes should be punished. There should be no room for mercy, or else they will get worse. I think Julie is right, Susan. You shouldn't have called the cops. This will only turn worse for you. But since you already called the cops, there's no going back. How will this turn worse for me when you are the one committing a crime? I would love to see that smug smile off your face. At that point, I started to laugh. Julia was smirking and shaking her head. Everyone looked at me like I was crazy, supposedly getting arrested, but I was laughing anyway. After calming down, I said, "Susan, I must say you had a brilliant plan in mind. It's truly remarkable how you carefully planned to trap me and make me look like a thief." "What do you mean? You are a thief since you stole my stuff." "Oh God, Mom, have some shame. You are really crossing all limits. We know that Skyla didn't steal your jewelry. It's all a trap you set to make her look guilty." Julia shocked everyone with that declaration. Susan looked a little nervous, but she wasn't giving up her plan. She acted innocent and clueless, saying, "What are you talking about? I didn't do anything. Julia is the thief. Quit the act." "Susan, you thought that you could plan to trap me, and I wouldn't know. Julia told me everything. She told me you were going to accuse me of theft and trap me. I had known it before the party. How dare you say that? You are influencing my poor child and making her say things you have no proof of your claims, Mom." "We didn't have proof that you told me about your plan, but we do have a better way to prove what you did." "That's right. Now, to protect my reputation, I will tell you what proof I have. You called the cops, so I would have had to reveal this anyway." "What do you mean, Skyla? What proof are you talking about? Did you forget that we have cameras in the house?" Guys, the look on Susan's face was priceless. She turned as white as a ghost and started to shake a little. She had totally forgotten this fact. Maybe she assumed we only had cameras in the front yard. She may not have thought that the inside of my house also had cameras. Noah also suddenly remembered this, and he said, "That's right. Even I forgot about the cameras. We have cameras in the hallway with a clear view of every room from outside. We can check that for the true story." "Why would we do that, Noah? I'm your mom, and I'm telling you that Skyla stole from me. We don't have to prove my words. Why are you going back now?" "Mom, I thought you wanted to get to the bottom of this. I don't believe for a second that my wife is a thief. Even if you don't want to see the proof, I do. I need to see with my own eyes that she stole from you. Otherwise, I wouldn't believe it." Susan did her best to stop Noah from seeing the CCTV footage. I pulled out the saved footage on my phone, and we started to look through the videos. Meanwhile, the cops arrived and were given a brief rundown by everyone. Susan immediately went to them and said, "Officers, you need to arrest my daughter-in-law, Skylar. She stole my jewelry. We found it in her closet. She's a criminal. You need to arrest her now." "I don't think so, Susan. Officers, I have proof that my mother-in-law tracked me and is making false claims against me." "Mom, do you have solid proof against your mother-in-law?" "I do have solid proof. Actually, my home has cameras. This is the footage it recorded from yesterday. I handed my phone to the officers to see. Noah and the rest saw that footage later. The footage clearly showed that Susan took her jewelry box from her room and went into my room when I wasn't home. When she came out, she didn't have the box with her. It proved that Susan had put her jewelry box in my room on purpose." Everyone was shocked, and Noah straight up started to shout at Susan. Susan looked at him with fear in her eyes and actually started to cry. I had never seen Noah so angry. He said, "Mom, how could you do this to my wife? Skyla has been nothing but kind to you, and you backstab her like this. What is wrong with you?" "Noah, please let me explain." "No, just no. I don't want to hear anything from you, Mom. I'm done. I am so done with you. You tried to destroy my wife's life and reputation on our anniversary. I will never forgive that. I seriously cannot believe how low you stooped, Mom. God, I'm ashamed of having a mom like you. I don't think I want any contact with you from now on." "Julia, you are absolutely right in your decision. In fact, I have the same thing in mind. Mom, we are done. Don't ever come near me or my wife again. We will go no contact with you." Hearing that, Susan started to cry loudly. She clutched Noah's arm and tried to reason with Julia as well, begging them to forgive her. It was prophetic, and the guests were shaking their heads at Susan. Most of the guests were family, so they didn't hold back their criticisms against Susan. Not one person stood in her support. Finally, the cops told me, "Mom, do you know that you can file a report against your mother-in-law for these false accusations?" "Yes, I do know that, officer. Thanks for reminding me, though. So, would you like to go ahead and press charges?" "I would suggest you do that. We will arrest her now and get her out of your way. I see you have a party to host." "Yes, officers, I would like to press charges. Please arrest her and accept my apology for this drama. Noah, you don't mind, do you? Absolutely not, Skyla. What Mom did was horribly wrong. You should be pressing charges. I give you my full support. Suddenly, it was all too much for our dear Susan. The cops descended on her and began handcuffing her while she struggled. They warned her that they could charge her for resisting arrest. But Susan wasn't in her right mind. She screamed and cried while begging Noah, Julie, and even me for forgiveness. Skyla, please don't do this to me. I'm your mother-in-law. What will people say when they see me get arrested? You didn't care when you called the cops on me, now did you? Why should I care? I'm right to get you arrested. You have wronged me. I'm sorry, Skyla. I shouldn't have done this. Look, we're family. We can solve this between ourselves. There is no need to get the cops involved now. Now, Susan, I distinctly remember you saying that criminals should not be spared, or else they will get worse. Seeing that you can easily evolve into a menace to this society, I absolutely have a duty as a concerned citizen to get you arrested. Susan looked shocked when I threw her words back at her. She also kept crying and mumbling apologies while everyone criticized her. The cops didn't waste much time and took her away. Noah and I went with them to the police station to file a report. Meanwhile, Julie stayed behind to tend to the guests. After Noah and I got to the police station, we filed an official report. I was going to sue her for good. She had done enough damage in my life and escalated badly. But still, I wanted Noah to be completely on board with me too. Noah, are you sure you're okay with this? If you're not comfortable with a police report, we can always go back. No, Skyla, we're not going back without a police report. We need to do this now. I have failed to protect you from my mom. She was about to destroy your life. I can't put this past me. You know that I didn't doubt you for a second, right? I know, Noah. Your mom being a psycho is not your fault. It's completely on her. Noah felt very guilty for not being able to protect me better. I understood his pain. He did love his mom very much. It's difficult to know that the woman who gave birth to you is an evil woman. But he still gave me the go-ahead to file the report, and so I did. He also promised never to let Susan back in our lives. We agreed to go to couples counseling to get a better grip on our marriage. Noah and I did return to the party, and we decided to continue with the celebration. The food was there, the people were there, and we were surrounded by supportive family and friends. We had no reason to just discard everything for one person. It was our anniversary after all. So, we resumed the celebrations and had a blast. Julia also had a great time too. All this while, my dear mother-in-law Susan was rotting in jail. So Susan didn't want the case to go to court after all. She made a settlement with my lawyer. I got a decent chunk of money while she got away with what she did. I really hope she changes her behavior after that. I say I hope because we are no longer in contact with Susan. Noah, me, and Julia all cut her off, as did some of her family members. The others simply don't entertain her anymore, but didn't block her straight away. I mean, who knows when she would fancy trapping other family members out of spite. Anyway, since we cut contact with Susan, my marriage improved a lot. The couple's counseling helped as well. We are currently expecting our first child and plan to keep our dear son away from Susan too. I apologize for any inconvenience, but I'm not feeling well today. Could I possibly take a short rest? It's quite unfortunate that I'm under the weather, especially since I am working remotely and have a virtual meeting scheduled. Despite having to make such a request, which feels a bit embarrassing, I appreciate your understanding, considering my pregnancy. It's kind of you to offer a break. Let's pause for 45 minutes and reconvene afterward. I'm genuinely thankful for your empathy and flexibility. Normally, such a break might not be allowed. but given the circumstances, I've decided to accept your kind offer and rest. Laying down for a bit should help me recover and return to work feeling refreshed. I've set my alarm for a half-hour nap, hoping it will do the trick. However, just as I was about to drift off, my mother-in-law unexpectedly entered my room, visibly upset. She accused me of neglecting my duties around the house in favor of spending time on my computer. Despite my attempts to explain that I was actually working and merely taking a necessary break due to my severe morning sickness, she didn't seem to believe me. Her reaction was harsh, criticizing me for what she perceived as laziness. In her anger, she misunderstood my situation entirely, even resorting to physical aggression, which was both shocking and dangerous, especially considering my pregnancy. Despite my pleas, she continued misunderstanding my attempts to explain as backtalk. This confrontation escalated to a point where I felt my safety and that of my unborn child was at risk. Regrettably, I had to cancel the meeting abruptly to address this urgent situation. Just then, a concerned voice from my computer inquired about the commotion, which momentarily caught my mother-in-law off guard. Her anger shifted to surprise. To give a bit of background about myself, my name is Sophia, and I'm 30 years old. After completing my education in a vocational school, I embarked on a career in it. Despite my qualifications, I found the job challenging and often doubted my abilities, feeling overwhelmed and considering leaving my position. However, around 4 years into my role, just as I was about to discuss my resignation due to the toll it was taking on me both physically and mentally, my boss proposed a different path. He recognized my contributions and offered me the opportunity to lead a new project, acknowledging my hard work and potential. This was a pivotal moment in my career. Feeling uncertain, I shared my doubts with my boss, confessing that taking on a new project seemed daunting, especially since I was on the verge of resigning. I couldn't imagine anyone entrusting me with such a significant responsibility given my hesitations. To my surprise, my boss reassured me, stating that it's natural not to be able to tackle everything solo and that teamwork was the key to success. He mentioned he had already found a collaborator for me and excused himself to fetch my new partner. The wait filled me with curiosity and a bit of anxiety about who my boss would bring. About 22 minutes later, he returned, introducing me to Jerry, my project partner. Jerry greeted me with a friendly smile, and I was immediately struck by his warm presence and good looks. As we got acquainted, I learned that Jerry, despite being from a different department, had an excellent reputation and was well regarded by both his peers and juniors. Our boss tasked us with making the project a success and left us to decide our approach. Alone with Jerry, I felt a mix of excitement and nerves, expressing my hope that I wouldn't hinder our progress. Jerry, ever the optimist, assured me we'd support each other and succeed together. Working with Jerry was a breath of fresh air. He excelled in interactions with clients, handling sales and presentations, while I focused on the technical aspects, developing systems as needed. Our collaboration not only pushed the project forward, but also brought us closer personally. We began spending time together outside of work, enjoying each other's company in a more relaxed setting, which naturally evolved into a romantic relationship 2 months later. We successfully completed the project, earning acclaim within the company, which reinforced my belief in my professional abilities and the value of perseverance. 2 years into our relationship, Jerry proposed, expressing his desire for my support in all aspects of life. Despite my limited experience in relationships, I was touched by his commitment, and feeling more content than ever, I happily accepted his proposal. Eager to share our happiness, we visited Jerry's family home to introduce ourselves. Upon arrival, Jerry's father welcomed us warmly, complimenting my appearance and inviting us in with open arms. His kindness made me optimistic about meeting my mother-in-law, hoping she would be just as welcoming. As we made our way to the living room, I couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and nerves about the new chapter in my life. Upon meeting my mother-in-law for the first time, I introduced myself with enthusiasm and respect, hoping for a warm reception. However, she seemed to dismiss my presence, focusing on the television instead of acknowledging me. It was Jerry who pointed out my attempt to greet her, prompting her to finally acknowledge us, albeit with a clear preference for her son over me. Jerry suggested overlooking his mother's cold reception and invited me to join them on the sofa, aiming to ease into a more formal introduction and discussion about our relationship. When the topic of our marriage came to light, his mother's reaction was far from supportive. She openly expressed her disapproval of me as Jerry's partner, attributing her stance to our differing backgrounds and implying that our values would be incompatible due to our disparate financial upbringings. Her words were a blunt dismissal of the possibility of our union, suggesting that my humble beginnings and Jerry's affluent lifestyle would prevent me from fitting into their family. Despite the shock and hurt her judgment caused, I struggled to formulate a response, feeling overwhelmed by the situation. Jerry and his father immediately came to my defense, challenging the notion that our differing backgrounds could dictate the success of our relationship. Jerry's objection to his mother's harsh words showed his commitment to us, and his father attempted to mediate the tension. Yet, my mother-in-law remained unconvinced, setting forth a condition that caught us all off guard. She demanded that if we were to marry, I must agree to live with them in their family home. This unexpected ultimatum was her way of granting her approval for our marriage, placing me in a difficult position. The thought of not starting our married life independently as I had hoped was disheartening. However, understanding the importance of family and the commitments that come with marriage, I agreed to her terms. I assured her of my readiness to embrace all responsibilities, including caring for her and my father-in-law when needed. My declaration surprised everyone, especially Jerry and his father, who likely did not anticipate my willingness to comply with such a significant request. I made it clear that my commitment to Jerry extended beyond our immediate happiness to include the well-being of his family. With a heavy heart yet determined resolve, I asked for her approval once more, hoping this gesture would bridge the gap between us and allow us to move forward as a family. Agreeing to my mother-in-law's condition, I found myself securing her approval for our marriage. She asked me to look after them, which I promised to do, marking the end of our initial tense introduction. Despite my reservations about living with my in-laws, the presence of Jerry and the support of my father-in-law gave me hope that things might turn out fine. Fast forward 8 months, Jerry and I were married, and I moved into his parents' house as agreed. The first few months passed with little incident. My mother-in-law remained mostly silent, perhaps taking the time to observe my integration into their household. Aware of her watchful eyes, I diligently managed household chores alongside my full-time job, hoping to avoid any cause for complaint. One morning, as I was about to leave for work, my mother-in-law stopped me, indicating she wanted to have a discussion. Anticipating a lengthy conversation, I braced myself for what lay ahead. I promptly informed my boss that I would be late as my mother-in-law chose to discuss my pregnancy, a topic not surprising given Jerry and I had been planning for our family's future. I was prepared for her thoughts, expecting her to suggest I quit my job to focus on the pregnancy and eventual motherhood. Indeed, she voiced exactly that opinion, arguing that I should leave my job immediately. This stance was difficult for me to accept. Before marrying Jerry, quitting might have seemed like a plausible option. However, my work had become a significant part of my identity and happiness. Moreover, with a baby on the way, the financial stability my job provided felt more crucial than ever. Despite my reasoning, my mother-in-law persisted, criticizing my decision to work and even my ability to manage household tasks. Her harsh words began to take a toll on my well-being. The conversation stretched on, and as time ticked away, I realized I was significantly late for work. Feeling cornered, I acknowledged her demand to quit my job, though I had no real intention of doing so. This concession was meant to end the immediate confrontation, but my mother-in-law pushed further, insisting I inform my employer of my resignation that very day. This left me in a difficult position, outwardly agreeing while internally conflicted about my next steps. After arriving at work significantly late, I couldn't shake off the unease clouding my thoughts. Seated at my desk, I found myself voicing my worries under my breath, catching the attention of my boss, who could tell something was amiss. Despite my attempts to dismiss his concerns, he saw through my facade and guided me to a secluded conference room for a private discussion. Reluctantly, I opened up about the dilemma I was facing at home. My mother-in-law had sternly advised me to quit my job due to my pregnancy, insisting that it was for the best. Yet the thought of leaving my job felt wrong to me. I wished to continue working, I told my boss. He listened intently, absorbing the complexity of my situation before falling into a contemplative silence. It wasn't long before a solution sparked in his mind. He proposed the idea of remote work, suggesting that it could be a viable compromise. Working from home would shield me from my mother-in-law's scrutiny and allow me to continue my professional duties without the physical strain of commuting. The idea resonated with me as a potential win-win solution. Acting swiftly, my boss headed straight to the relevant department to get the green light for me to work remotely. From my desk, I watched anxiously for any sign of approval. Soon enough, a positive gesture from my boss confirmed that I would be transitioning to working from home. Grateful for his support, I prepared for this new chapter, hopeful that it would alleviate the tensions at home. I stayed later at the office to organize and hand over necessary documents to my colleagues, announcing that I would be working remotely starting the next day. When I arrived home that evening, I was met with a stern-faced mother-in-law who seemed prepared for a confrontation. She questioned me about quitting my job, to which I explained my new arrangement of working from home. Her response was less intense than I anticipated, allowing me to sigh in relief, albeit temporarily. I was thankful for my employer's flexibility, but little did I know this change would soon introduce a new set of challenges. The very next day, my mother-in-law's attempts to assert her presence in my new work environment began with an early wake-up call that was far from necessary. Her loud demands disrupted my sleep at 6:05 a.m., a stark reminder of the delicate balance I would need to maintain between my work responsibilities and my new living situation. As I tried to ignore her and catch a few more moments of rest, I realized that navigating this new arrangement would require patience and resilience. Despite my best efforts to ignore her persistent calls, my mother-in-law's voice eventually became so loud that it risked waking my husband, wanting to avoid causing him any inconvenience. Reluctantly, I left the warmth of my bed and headed to the living room to address her demands. "What's going on? It's only 6 o'clock in the morning?" I questioned, only to be met with her insistence that it was already time to start the day and prepare breakfast, a task she deemed overdue by her standards. Her logic seemed flawed to me. Breakfast was usually a later morning activity in our household. Yet, according to her, she had been patient with me up until this point, allowing me to sleep because I had to go to work. But now, with me working from home, she expected me to rise early every day for breakfast duties. Despite my internal objections, I found myself in the kitchen, starting the day far earlier than necessary, preparing breakfast under her watchful eye. After announcing that breakfast was ready, my mother-in-law criticized both the timeliness and quality of the meal, particularly targeting the soup for being too salty. Defending my cooking, I tried to explain that I had followed the usual recipe, but her mind seemed made up, using this as a pretext to offer me a lesson in housekeeping. A proposal I accepted with a heavy heart, hoping to keep the peace. Her lessons soon proved to be a series of exhaustive demands that extended well beyond the kitchen. Once my husband and father-in-law departed for work, I had hoped to start my remote work. However, my mother-in-law had other plans, insisting on a thorough completion of household chores before I could even think about sitting down at my computer. Her understanding of work was fundamentally different from mine, equating value only with physical labor and dismissing the legitimacy of remote work as inconsequential. Feeling cornered, I complied with her instructions, putting aside my professional responsibilities to tackle the cleaning and laundry. Despite her continuous dissatisfaction with my efforts, She demanded a level of cleanliness that she herself did not adhere to, critiquing my use of the vacuum and insisting on more traditional methods of cleaning, which consumed even more of my time. After hours of household chores, I finally returned to my desk, eager to catch up on my work. Yet the reprieve was short-lived. My mother-in-law's voice soon echoed once again, summoning me from my work with an urgency that left me wondering what possible task awaited me this time. The cycle of interruptions made it clear that balancing my remote work with her expectations was going to be an ongoing challenge, requiring patience, tact, and perhaps a new strategy. My attempts to balance work with my mother-in-law's demands reached a boiling point when she interrupted me once again, asking for tea while I was deeply engrossed in my work. Frustrated and unable to contain my feelings any longer, I asked if she could possibly make it herself. Given that I was in the middle of something important, this honest expression of my boundaries was met with an exaggeratedly negative response from her, accusing me of being disrespectful and lazy, mistaking my work on the computer for leisure. The situation escalated quickly when, in a burst of anger, she physically grabbed my shirt. Although she didn't go as far as to hit me, the threat of violence hung heavily in the air. I managed to defuse the situation with an apology, but this incident marked a turning point. From then on, my mother-in-law seemed to assert her dominance more aggressively, summoning me for increasingly petty tasks and treating me more like a servant than a family member. Despite pleading with my husband and father-in-law to intervene, their presence did little to curb her behavior, as she cleverly concealed her true nature around them. Months of enduring this treatment left me both physically and emotionally drained. However, a particularly distressing incident occurred on a day when I had diligently completed all my chores early in anticipation of an important online meeting, just as the meeting was about to start. Feeling suddenly unwell, I had to request a short break during the meeting, which was kindly granted by the meeting leader. As I lay down to rest, my room door flew open, and my mother-in-law stormed in, accusing me of shirking my duties under the guise of work. Despite my attempts to explain that I was genuinely unwell and had already completed the household tasks, she launched into a tirade, questioning the legitimacy of my work and accusing me of lying. Her anger escalated to a shocking act of violence as she began to physically assault me, endangering not just my well-being but also that of my unborn child. In a desperate attempt to protect myself and my baby, I had no choice but to cancel the meeting and seek safety. In this moment of crisis, a voice from my computer offered a brief distraction, but it did little to deter my mother-in-law's fury. Her actions, driven by misunderstanding and a refusal to acknowledge the legitimacy of my work and health needs, underscored the severity of the situation, leaving me in a position where I had to reevaluate my living situation and seek a resolution to ensure the safety and well-being of both myself and my child. In a dramatic turn of events, my confrontation with my mother-in-law reached its climax when, after enduring months of mistreatment, an unexpected ally emerged. As I lay on the bed feeling vulnerable and wronged, my plea for help was unexpectedly broadcasted through the open meeting screen, capturing the attention of my father-in-law, who witnessed the entire ordeal. Reacting swiftly to what he had seen, my father-in-law rushed home, determined to put an end to the abuse. The room was charged with tension as he confronted my mother-in-law, demanding an explanation for her actions. His presence was formidable, echoing the authority he wielded in his professional life. Yet it was clear that his outrage stemmed from a place of protective concern for both me and the unborn child. My mother-in-law, caught off guard and unable to justify her behavior, attempted to defend herself. The situation escalated when my father-in-law revealed his direct involvement in the project that had brought me into the meeting, a project that symbolized a collaborative effort between our companies and highlighted the importance of my work. The revelation that my professional contributions were integral to a project of such significance seemed to momentarily shift the power dynamics within the room. Yet, the scene took a concerning turn when, in a moment of misguided retribution, my father-in-law mimicked my mother-in-law's earlier actions against me. Despite his intentions, I couldn't condone the violence and intervened, urging him to stop. Grateful for his support, but unwilling to see harm come to anyone else, in the aftermath, I found the courage to address my mother-in-law directly, challenging her dismissive attitude toward my work and asserting my autonomy. I explained the necessity of my job and the steps I had taken to adapt my working conditions, emphasizing that her demands had repercussions beyond our household. My words were an assertion of my independence, that I was neither her servant nor someone to be belittled or controlled. Her response to my defiance was predictable. Yet in that moment, I stood my ground, empowered by the validation of my work and the support of my family. The confrontation served as a pivotal moment, one that redefined the boundaries within our household and marked a new chapter in my journey toward balancing my professional ambitions with my personal life. In a moment of confrontation, I stood my ground against my mother-in-law's attempt to physically intimidate me once more. Instead of succumbing to fear, I firmly caught her wrist, warning her against underestimating me due to my apparent calm demeanor. My assertion of self-defense seemed to take her by surprise, leading to a moment of realization for her. She looked defeated and agreed to my request to inform the person in charge of the meeting about its cancellation, allowing me some peace to concentrate on my work. Later, as my father-in-law returned to his professional commitments, I noticed a significant shift in my mother-in-law's behavior. She no longer interfered with me. This newfound tranquility allowed me to make remarkable progress in my work undisturbed, a stark contrast to the previous months of constant interruptions. That evening, as I was preparing dinner, my husband and father-in-law arrived home. My husband, having been briefed by his father about the day's events, expressed concern for my well-being. Despite the tension, I reassured him that I was all right. However, he felt the family discussion was necessary and summoned everyone to the living room. As we gathered, the atmosphere was tense, especially around my mother-in-law, who seemed anxious about the impending conversation. My husband directly addressed the day's events, prompting my mother-in-law to admit her actions. This confession seemed to weigh heavily on him, marking a moment of realization about the extent of her behavior towards me. The silence was then broken by my father-in-law's declaration of his intention to divorce, acknowledging his part in allowing the situation to escalate to this point. The announcement shocked everyone, especially my mother-in-law, who pleaded for reconsideration. However, my father-in-law stood firm in his decision. The following days saw the agreement of the divorce being put into action, with plans to remove my mother-in-law from the home. As she prepared to leave, burdened with her belongings, she sought closure, thanking me for the time spent together. At this moment, I felt compelled to address her one last time, not out of forgiveness, but perhaps to offer a final piece of advice or closure. Her expression shifted as she turned back at my call, possibly hoping for a last-minute reprieve or reconciliation. However, my words for her were not of forgiveness, but a reminder of the consequences of her actions, emphasizing the importance of respect and understanding within a family. This encounter, though brief, was a poignant reminder of the complex dynamics that had unfolded and the transformative journey we had all embarked on as a result of these tumultuous events. After my mother-in-law left the house, carrying the weight of her actions and the consequences they brought, I couldn't help but feel a mix of relief and contemplation. The idea of seeking legal action against her crossed my mind, especially after her reckless behavior, but I chose a path of restraint. Instead, I sought reassurance from my father-in-law, wondering if the decision for him to divorce her was truly what he wanted. His response, filled with regret for not recognizing her true nature sooner, affirmed the necessity of the separation. In the weeks that followed, the absence of my mother-in-law brought newfound peace to the household. My work flourished without interruption, and the project initiated by my father-in-law's company progressed smoothly. While curiosity about my mother-in-law's current situation lingered, it was a distant concern compared to the tranquility and focus I now enjoyed. The question of her well-being finally found its moment over dinner one evening when my husband inquired about her. My father-in-law, with a hint of concern and curiosity in his voice, shared that he had visited her. The description of her living conditions, marked by disarray and convenience store meals, painted a stark contrast to the life she once led. Her current employment at a supermarket, supplemented by a pension, suggested a significant adjustment from her previous lifestyle. This revelation brought mixed emotions. While there was a part of me that felt vindicated, another part couldn't help but reflect on the drastic changes she had undergone. The knowledge that she was struggling did not bring joy, but a complex sense of closure. The focus now shifted to the future, particularly to the arrival of our daughter. The commitment to providing a nurturing, positive environment for her became my primary focus, ensuring she would grow up in a household defined by love, respect, and stability, far removed from the turmoil of the past. As I anticipated the birth of our daughter, the resolve to shield her from negative influences strengthened. The experience with my mother-in-law served as a poignant reminder of the values and environment I wished to cultivate for our growing family. With this vision in mind, I looked forward to welcoming our new addition with optimism and open arms.